A hush lay over the dragon-shaped island at first light, the surf muttering against the black glass shore as though even the sea were reluctant to wake. Jon Snow stood alone on the jut of weather-worn basalt below Dragonstone's gatehouse, fingers laced behind his back, north wind stirring the cloak at his shoulders. In the courtyard above, unsullied sentries shifted like statues come alive, and somewhere behind him a smith's hammer rang against inoculated steel, each strike echoing faintly inside the caverns of his skull. Dawn's thin rose-gray painted the walls. The color reminded him of old blood washed into snow. It would never be home. He had refused her. Gods help him. He had looked into the hard, unblinking violet of Daenerys Targaryen's eyes, had watched the gentle set of her mouth tighten, and had said the word no northern king ever flinched from. No. No oath of fealty, no crown cast down at her feet, no golden promise of a realm reunited beneath a single dragon banner. He had taken what mattered, the Dragonglass sealed in 33 oaken crates, and turned his back before her unsullied captain could say whether the queen would have him flogged or merely sneer at his retreating shape. Now the skiff waited below, roped to the pier. Davos was already aboard, tamping the sail to the reef-notch mast, grumbling in Stormlander cadences about currents and half-remembered tides. Gendry knelt at the prow beside a bundled warhammer, raw arms flecked white with salt, and Jon remained upon the ledge a moment longer, breathing the taste of distant ice, thinking of Winterfell's crenellations frosted pearl gray beneath moonlight, of white wolf eyes glowing where the gods would pooled shadow, of the north watching, always, through the shuttered windows of memory. He had given her most of the night to change her mind. He had given himself just as long to doubt. Yet as darkness thinned and the cinders in the long hall hearth guttered to quiet ash, neither had relented. Tyrion Lannister had appeared in the small hours, bard's lantern in hand, wine untasted, voice low as conspiracy. "You cannot fight the dead alone," the dwarf had said, soft enough to keep the guards from overhearing. "Nor can I kneel," Jon answered, "only to rise a beggar king whose crown is borrowed. Stubbornness is not the same as honor." "Tell my father that," Jon replied, surprised by the bitterness in his throat. Tyrion did not flinch. "I have." Lord Eddard's head remains of similar opinion. The memory stung more sharply than the sea air, and Jon let it drift away on the tide. He descended granite steps damp with spray, boots finding the rhythm of the sea. One by one, the queen's stevedores lowered crates onto the skiff, smooth black oblongs packed with splintering rocks ancient as the wall itself, the only substance the children had ever claimed might unmake winter's shadows. The wood creaked like an old man's back beneath their weight, but the ropes held. Davos raised 2 fingers when the loading was done, a small, triumphant signal that might easily have been mistaken for a prayer. Jon stepped aboard last. The craft dipped beneath his boots, brine puddling across planks scarred by forgotten voyages. He turned once more toward Dragonstone's heights. Above the stair the mother of dragons awaited, silver-pale hair unbound in the wind, lips parted as if to call him back. Drogon crouched on the ridge beyond her, black wings half-mantled and eyes like molten copper fixed on the human speck daring to depart. Jon's breath plumed white despite the summer day. He felt the weight of that gaze, a threat wrapped in grief, and found that he could not hate her for it. They were both heirs to dying houses, both walking a road they had never wished to tread, but neither had room for another's crown. He placed a closed fist to his heart in lieu of farewell. Daenerys said nothing. Perhaps she could not. The sea took them. The narrow sea in August smelled of rotting kelp, wet linen, and storms yet unborn. For 3 days the skiff skimmed before a nervous wind, its single square sail patched by Davos' coarse stitches. Gendry took the tiller when the old knight's hands cramped. Jon rowed when both men nodded over the oars. Sleep came as shattered minutes between the slap of waves, yet dreams pressed harder than wakefulness. Ghost paced the ship's wake, silent white shape racing upon the swells, though no Real wolf stood there. He saw Bran's dimly glowing stare beyond Raven's wings, Sansa's parchment lips moving around words he could not hear, Alice Karstark's quiet courage in the Godswood when last he'd summoned the northern banners, and Tormund Giantsbane's booming laugh echoing in a corridor of ice where laughter soon would freeze. On the fifth night, the wind failed. They drifted beneath a sky so star-clouded Jon half expected to glimpse Valyria reborn among the constellations. Davos boiled salted cod on a brazier nailed to the mast step, cursing quietly when sparks landed on the canvas deckcloth. Gendry tapped a Dragonglass dagger's edge with a whetstone made from a chunk of the same queer crystal. Each click rang brittle and cold. Jon tasted the stew only to find he could not swallow more than 3 spoonfuls. Hunger had never left him so hollow, but duty was an emptier thing still. That night, the sea offered visions. Somewhere aft, a long, hollow horn groaned across the black waters. Not a ship's cry, but something older, mournful. A single note dragged across the horizon until it faded to nothing. They saw no sail, no whaleback, no lantern. Yet all 3 men woke at once, sitting rigid until dawn spilled pallid over the still water. None spoke of it, but after, Gendry lashed a line of Dragonglass daggers along the gunwale, crude points jutting toward the east as though they might keep phantom horns at bay. On the 7th morning, the wind returned out of the north, keening and cold. Jon smelled snow. By sunset, the skiff had cleared the fingers and turned for Eastwatch by the sea. Only then did he feel the true weight of the crates. Hope, obligation, and a promise to ghosts who could not forgive failure. Eastwatch squatted upon the world's edge, its towers streaked with brine and gull droppings, its gates yawning black against the encroaching night. Fires glimmered atop the parapets in defiance of the settling frost. Tormund met them on the pier, red beard whipped sideways by gales that would have chilled a summer bird to stillness. "About bloody time, Crow King," he bellowed, crossing wet planks in 3 strides to clamp his enormous arms around Jon's shoulders. "Was thinking I'd have to break into that fire-breather's castle myself and drag you home." Jon clenched the wildling's wrist. Warmth surged through numb fingers. "Busy stoking the fires down south, weren't you? Her Grace offered me a throne for my knees. And you kept them straight as pine, eh?" Tormund laughed, deep and fierce. "That's the North I know." He fell silent, though, when he saw the crates. Wordless, he walked among them, palms slapping pine lids, knuckles tapping. At last his gaze found Jon again. "This is the real thing?" "Dragonglass, all of it," Jon answered. "Enough for 10,000 blades. If the smiths can keep the forge lit, they'd better." The little snowbird sent a raven. "Says the lords are restless. Some say you left them for a woman's charms. Those lords should try sailing 10 days with Davos stew," Gendry muttered. "Watch your mouth, boy. My stew kept us living." "Barely." Tormund's laughter chased the wind across the ramparts. If the threat of night terrors pressed on him, he did not let it show. Jon envied that. They hauled the first of the black crystal into Eastwatch's smithy under torchlight. Smoke rolled across rafters, thick with the musk of coal and iron and human fatigue. Each wedge of obsidian kissed sparks off hammers and chisels, showering the floor with shards that hissed through straw. Every fracture released a whisper, like glass frogs croaking in a far cave. Jon felt the sound burrow behind his breastbone and lodge there until his pulse beat in uncanny accord. Later, Davos pressed a cup of hot wine into his gloved hands. "She'll sail," the old knight said, eyes shining red in the forge flames. "I've met a good many queens in my days, lad. The Dragon Queen is not accustomed to losing. She'll come one way or another." "I know," Jon admitted, voice too soft to carry. "I fear she'll come too late or too soon, and neither will save us." 3 ravens climbed into the sky at dawn. One to Winterfell, one to Castle Black, and one winging south across half a kingdom to Maester Wolkan at White Harbor's rookery. Each bore the same blunt litany. Dragonglass secured, forging begun, winter marching. Jon signed them all with the stark direwolf below the words King in the north. Felt both heavier and hollower than ever before. He remained a Sen Knight at Eastwatch, overseeing the first blades. Spearheads narrow and wicked bright, arrowheads like tiny shards of night sky fallen to earth, daggers carved into leaf-shaped slivers mounted on weirwood white bone hilts. Gendry's smith arm glistened with sweat in the cold. The boy struck obsidian so deftly it seemed the glass shaped itself. By the 6th day, the Night's Watch had armed 100 rangers. Thorold Stonehand, a black-bearded ranger missing 2 fingers, wept silent thanks when John fitted a dragonglass pommel into his scarred palm. On the eve of John's departure, a rider arrived from Last Hearth half-frozen, his horse staggering beneath him. The Umbers reported a silence in the woods beyond their hills. No wolves, no hares, no birds. Fires refused to burn bright no matter the kindling. Maple leaves were falling black as soot though summer was barely spent. Rumor spoke of blue-eyed shadows glimpsed at the edge of lantern light. John ordered every maester on the wall to gather raven ink and record each omen. He left at first light with Tormund, Davos, and a dozen rangers bound for Winterfell, dragging 6 wagons of newly forged weapons behind shaggy northern horses. The carts clattered like bone dice cast by a spiteful god. Frost tightened its fist around Eastwatch's silent towers as they rode away. Travel south along the King's Road was never swift, not when each mile offered a fresh ruin of war. The fields of Queen's Crown lay scorched where Lannister and Stark patrols had clashed months before. Broken helms rusted amid charred oat stalks. At the ruins of Deepwood Motte they found Lady Sibel Glover standing atop the gatehouse, a child at each hip, her face drawn as parchment. 3 riders of the Ironborn had been found flayed 2 days prior, empty eye sockets packed with snow though the air remained warm as a midden. John knelt to each corpse, prized open the ribs, and confirmed what he feared. Dusted inside the cavities lay specks of frost so cold they smoked. He gave Lady Sibel 12 crates of arrowheads and a promise that the North would not stand alone. When she grasped his forearm, she squeezed so hard her nails bit the leather. Behind her, the children's eyes were wide and terribly silent. Each night thereafter the wind blew colder. Ghost joined them outside Whiterun Pass, silent as regret. The direwolf rubbed his pale muzzle against John's elbow, red eyes smoldering with something like rebuke, and something far worse, relief. Winterfell's gray walls appeared on the horizon beneath clouds as thick as hammer iron. Smoke lifted from a dozen chimneys, yet the color was wrong. Not brown or blue, but thin and white, as though someone boiled snow upon the hearths. John spurred his gelding faster, the carts rattling behind. The portcullis swung open in time for his mount to thunder through. Inside the yard, armored men of House Manderly stood across from karst-jawed men of House Glover, each host bristling with more fear than fury. Sansa Stark stood between them, unhooded despite the cold, her red hair snapping like a banner in a rising gale. All eyes turned as John dismounted. Sansa's guarded smile lasted half a heartbeat before it crumbled into something older than grief. She reached him in 3 strides, seizing his forearms. "Your Grace," she whispered, formal for the crowd's sake. Then lower, "They say you knelt to a dragon queen. I did not. They say you refused her, and she swore to take the North by fire. I pray that rumor proves as empty as this grain." He tapped a burlap sack stacked nearby, hollow as a drum. "But it changes nothing. The dead march. Grain changes everything," Sansa replied, mouth tight. "Our stores are half of what they should be. The Umbers send no carts. Lady Ramsay says the frost blighted 3 fields in a night. Then Winterfell feeds them until spring." "Spring," she almost laughed. "Brother, look about you. Autumn is spent." The white knife froze a fortnight past. John's reply died on his tongue. He felt the sky pressing closer, clouds piled like cathedrals overhead. Somewhere a raven croaked, wings beating at still air. That night the great hall buzzed with voices, lords demanding explanation, Karstark men repeating tales of shadows in the barley, Manderly knights swearing that ships crewed by corpses had been seen adrift off Sweet Sister. John let them speak until the fire burned low. Then he stood, dragonglass dagger in hand, and told them precisely what he had seen beyond the wall, what Bran had shown him through a rook's borrowed eyes, what Samwell Tarly had read in forgotten scrolls at the Citadel. He spoke until throats grew hush-rough and the faces about him turned drawn as lantern skins. At last Lady Barbary Dustin rose, wiry hands braced on the table. "You ask us to bleed for a cause you abandoned. My king, you left your lands to beg help and returned with none. I returned with these. Jon thrust the blade point first into the table's oak, where it vibrated like a tuning fork, black edge licking firelight. Enough for every shield-bearer from here to the shivering sea. Will it feed them? Lord Serwyn snarled. Will bitterness? Sansa countered, her voice soft but carrying. Or should we break our ranks before the first arrow flies? A hush followed. Jon withdrew the dagger, its steel-cold hilt steady in his palm. They voted before midnight. Save one surly then whose brow bore a blood-black tattoo. All swore fealty anew. Jon's shoulders sagged with the weight of their trust. He wished he had dragonfire to give them or kingdom's worth coin. Yet Dragonglass was all he possessed. Black blades and a truth colder than the grave. Far to the south, Daenerys Stormborn paced the solar atop Dragonstone's keep. The moon hung full beyond the open shutters, gilding the salt glaze upon her cheeks. Tyrion stood by the hearth, silent, hands clasped at the small of his back. He would not bend, she said, breaking 3 hours' quiet. So you've told me, a dozen times. I offered alliance, and he offered honesty. A muscle fluttered in her jaw. Do you take his part in this? I take the part of the living, your grace. They tend to pay better. He tossed her a tired smile. Ah, yes. Mostly. Daenerys turned to the window, watching Drogon circle the tower, wings carving moonlight. If the long night truly comes, my dragons must stand with the north. Then fly there, Tyrion suggested. Bend to him if he will not bend to you. Should a queen bow? Should a queen survive? Tyrion countered softly. She closed her eyes, seeing not the Black Sea but a winter field where men she did not know died for a wall she had never touched, against an evil she had not tried to imagine. For a breath, she shivered. In the crypts of Winterfell below cold stone arches, Jon knelt beside the effigy of Lyanna Stark. The chill seeped through his bones and up into his thoughts. Father, he said, though he addressed neither sculpture nor ghost, I have chosen honor above victory again, as you once did. If I was wrong, forgive me. His words faded into hollows where centuries of dust had gathered. Ghost waited near the stair, tail sweeping stone. The direwolf's breath puffed pale in the lantern glow, one of the very few warm lights left in the north. Jon rose. Duty called him to the yard where iron kettles boiled pitch, to the forge where Gendry shaped spearheads that sang with every strike, to the library where old Maester Girardi's tracked frost creep along the wall and marked sightings on a parchment map now flecked with blue pins like stars across midnight. He did not sleep more than an hour in any night. Nor did Sansa. She drafted ration counts and bartered for barley from White Harbor in exchange for promise of lands come spring. Arya returned on a dawn stiff with hoarfrost, face speckled with blood not her own. Speaking of Bolton's loyal yet to fear who had chosen to kneel when faced with the shimmer of a Valyrian steel dagger at their throats. Bran seldom left the Godswood. Ravens perched on his carved wheelchair and whispered things that made his eyes glow chill blue in moonlight. Those nights, Jon wondered whether his refusal at Dragonstone had damned them. But daylight always killed the doubt. The forge rang, arrowheads mounted. 10,000 northern hearts needed certainty, not regret. The first snowfall arrived 3 weeks early. It settled thick upon the battlements, muting the world. While men shoveled drifts away from the gatehouse, Bran wheeled into the courtyard and spoke in a voice not entirely his own. They come, he said. Jon felt a cold beyond the day's weather. How long? 3, perhaps 4 days. They will not tarry now. Sansa's knuckles whitened around the rail. We are not ready. There is no ready, Bran replied, eyes vast, as though he looked on things no other could endure. Jon summoned every lord, lady, and captain that afternoon. He showed them the dragonglass caches stacked now in narrow trenches like black teeth. He showed them the plan, archers on the walls, infantry in crescent before the trench, cavalry hidden behind the ridge east of the King's Road. He showed them the map of tunnels where the women, children, and infirm would shelter when the horns blew. He showed them Ghost and told them, simple as truth, that every soul in the castle must stand or fall together. No one laughed. That evening, as torches guttered in wind heavy with coming snow, a horn sounded atop the watchtower. A single rising note, thin with distance. John's spine prickled. The last time he had heard such a call had been at Hardhome, when the world's edge had cracked beneath the tread of an enemy that knew no hurry because it knew no doubt. He climbed the parapets. Far to the south, shapes moved beyond the tree line. Dark silhouettes etched against pale drift, ranks too neat for raiders, too silent for wildlings. Blue sparks glimmered where eyes should be. John watched them assembling like pieces upon a game board older than kingdoms. The night held her breath. He wondered whether Daenerys had taken flight yet, whether Tyrion still argued near a hearth of black stone, whether the Silver Queen would appear in time to burn the frost before it swallowed the world. And he wondered whether kneeling would have changed anything at all. At his side, Sansa asked in a voice small as candle smoke, "Do we still have hope?" John set his hand upon the hilt of his Dragonglass sword. He felt its edge thrum beneath his glove like a living vein of star cold. "We have ourselves," he said, "and as long as we stand, the night is not the only thing that endures." Below, forges roared one final time, casting sparks upward like brief constellations be. Before the first battle cry of winter, no stars showed that night, only a bleached white sky unrolling above a dark land. Somewhere in the hush before dawn, a raven burst upward from the godswood, its wings scattering hoarfrost. It wheeled once above Winterfell and vanished north, toward walls no longer built of stone but of storm. Jon Snow watched it go, Dragonglass blade bare in his hand, and thought he heard a horn in the far distance, the answer to some older, deeper call. One that sounded not of surrender, but of the living remembering what it meant to be alive. He breathed, fogging the air before him. Let the night come, he thought. I will meet it standing. And so the first book of the battle for dawn turned a silent page, inked not in black or crimson but in a deeper, colder shade, the color of the North's own resolve, waiting for light enough to read what would follow. The forge fires still throbbed long after midnight, dyeing the drifting snow embers orange and throwing restless shadows across Winterfell's yard. Jon stood beneath the great flue with Gendry, watching each new spearhead emerge from the molds like blades cut from the night itself. For every piece that cooled, 6 more blanks lay stacked, glowing dim as dragon hearts. Steam hissed when a smith quenched a glowing socket in brine. The smell of salt and scorched alder filled the air, sharp enough to cut through exhaustion. A shrill echo tremored in the stone. Somewhere outside the walls a raven cried 3 times. Once for warning, twice for loss, a final time for things no words could shape. Jon's breath plumed. He left Gendry slumped against the anvil and climbed the turret stair. Frost crept over each step, so thin it glittered beneath torch sheen like a spider's thread. Near the top he met Lady Lyanna Mormont descending, small shoulders squared beneath a bear pelt cloak far too heavy for her slight frame. She spared no courtesy. Her gaze flicked past him to the swathes of black sky beyond the arrow slits. "They'll be here before you finish," she said, voice blunt as a smith's punch. "I know." He tried a tight smile, but it felt borrowed and brittle. "That's why every arm that can swing a hammer is at work." "I can swing a hammer." She pushed past him before he found reply, leather boots clipping as briskly as any grown soldier's. Jon reached the rampart. The world beyond lay locked beneath a silence wrong for winter. Too complete, too purposeful. The forest blurred. Branches sagged with new ice, every pine and birch frozen in mid-breath, as though some unseen will had commanded them to stillness. Torches along the outer wall sputtered feebly, their flames blew at the tips. He laid a hand on the parapet stone and felt the cold pulse inside it like alien blood. Sansa joined him minutes later, wrapped in a mantle of silver fox. Her cheeks were raw, eyes rimmed sleepless. "Bran says the trees beyond the King's Road have started whispering," she murmured. "He feels them dying in their roots. He feels everything these days." Jon's voice came out rough. "Has he slept at all?" "I don't think sleep means the same thing to him any longer." They watched together, Far lines of lanterns moved inside the courtyard, knots of men and women shuffling toward billets. Chests of arrows were hefted to the battlement walkways. Nets of pitch jars were raised by rope. Somewhere a horn tested its voice. Deep, resonant, nervous. Sansa spoke again, softer. "I never asked you what she was like." Jon's heartbeat stumbled. He kept his gaze on the distant pines. "A storm contained in skin. Will she come? I don't know." Honesty tasted of iron. "If she does, she'll bring fire enough to burn the snows to mud. But perhaps the price would be all we've sworn to protect." "And if she doesn't?" He could not answer. Behind them, Winterfell's banners snapped in a sudden gust. The dire wolf, the flayed man, the merman, all jerking like creatures strangled by unseen hands. Frost crystals drifted in spirals, catching torchlight, collapsing before they touched the flags. In the yard, Arya sparred with the hound beneath a hanging lantern. Steel rang, then wood as the hound's practice axe caught on a shield rim. Arya riposted with needle, tip flicking across his gorget hard enough to spark. Jon descended to them, watching the dance. Sweat ran slick along Arya's temple despite the chill. Sandor Clegane's breaths plumed in gusts through his scarred lips. "You fight like a singer's tale," the hound growled as Arya darted sideways. "Pretty twists, no weight." "You move like a drunk boar," she shot back. "All weight, no wit." Jon stepped into the lantern glow. "Both of you save your strength. The fight we need you for isn't here." Sandor spat. "This is me saving my strength, Snowboy." Yet he lowered the axe and wiped frost from the haft. Arya straightened, cheeks flushed, eyes bright as forged steel. "Bran says they'll reach the ridge by tomorrow dusk," she said. "That leaves one night." "Less," Jon corrected. "Whites don't rest. If the wind favors them, they'll press through the dark and strike by false dawn." "What's the plan when they breach the trench?" Sandor asked, peeling a splinter from his palm. "They can't breach what they can't cross." Jon pointed toward the stack of ceramic jars lining the bailey wall. "Each is filled with pitch and powdered dragonglass. We shatter them with flaming arrows as they enter. And if they climb the battlements," Arya added, "we greet them with spears." The hound's smile twisted. Flamelight licked his eyes. "I was born to kill things. Dead ones make no difference." He hefted the axe again, muscled shoulders bunching. "But a dragon would help." Jon felt the words lodge beneath his sternum. He dismissed them with a nod and went to find Davos. The old knight stood inside the great hall's vestibule among crates of hardtack and cider, directing 3 Reed cousins from Greywater Watch. They formed a human chain, passing small chests of dragonglass arrowheads toward the stair that led under the keep. Every third transfer Davos paused, wiping his brow, murmuring instructions about fletching color. Red for the walls, black for the trench, white for the last volley to mark retreat. "Logistics wins wars, lad," he sighed when Jon approached. "Or loses them when we miscount. We can't afford miscounts." Jon bent to lift a chest, feeling the weight bite into his thighs. Davos guided it onto a reed boy's shoulder, steadying the narrow back. "Your sister's worried about grain. Does worrying grow wheat?" "I in its way. Pushes men to clever acts." Davos tugged his collar close. "I've been a smuggler most my life. Kings rise, kings fall, but bellies stay. Come spring, somewhere, somehow we'll find more grain, if there's anybody left to eat it." Jon forced a smile. "You always make it sound simple." Davos tapped the stagbone finger that replaced 2 he'd lost long ago. "It's never simple. That's why I say it." A horn sounded one short note from the east tower. Jon tensed. A single blast, riders approaching. He reached the gatehouse as 2 shaggy garrons clattered through on ice-slick hooves. Men bundled in black furs swayed in the saddles, their faces raw with cold and horror. They bore the crescent moon and 4 diamonds, the crest of House Umber, though one pennon was torn half away, edges caked with rime. Lord Malachy Umber slid from his horse using one arm. The other hung limp and blackened to the elbow. Jon caught him beneath the shoulders as he buckled. Frost had spiderwebbed across the Lord's whiskers, turning ginger to white. They broke the deadwood line at Widow's Watch, Maliki rasped. Snow like knives. We tried to hold the causeway, set the Dragonglass stakes, but they came under the ice. Under. His voice cracked. I saw men vanish, pulled down screaming. Then the lake froze solid over their mouths. How many escaped? Maybe 40. Most fled east toward the ridge. If they make it, the dead will be on their heels. Malachi's eyes rolled to the high walls, perhaps seeking comfort in their age. My men need refuge. They have it. John signaled for Maester Gerardes, who hurried forward with 2 novices. They lifted Maliki onto a litter. His blackened arm crumbled at the sleeve's edge, shedding brittle ice. Outside the walls, the sky darkened, though neither dusk nor cloud had prompted it. The moon slid behind a pallid haze, and the courtyard lanterns guttered simultaneously, their glass chimneys cracking. Somewhere a dog whined, then fell silent. Arya appeared beside John without sound, shoulders taut. That haze, she murmured. Is it weather? John listened.
No birds.
No wind through banners. Only the faint creak of timbers adjusting to new cold. It's them. She nodded once, darted away into shadow. By the time John returned to the yard, torches were being distributed to archers on the walls. Carts poured sand atop fresh-laid pitch trenches. Children huddled like ghost kittens beneath nurses' cloaks, filing into cellars. He searched for a moment of stillness and found it only where Bran sat beneath the heart tree. Snow had sheathed the weirwood's red leaves in white, so they resembled veins beneath skin. Bran's eyes glowed faint, the color of distant lanterns viewed through frost glass. Ravens clustered on the branches overhead, unmoving, feathers rimmed with ice. Is there aught more you can tell me? John asked. Bran's lids fluttered. When he spoke, his tone was not wholly his own. Older, steadier. There is a storm behind the first ranks. They bring giants woven of bone. They bring winds that quench fire. We have Dragonglass. We have the walls. The walls are memories. Memories crack when too much silence presses against them. John touched Bran's frail shoulder, feeling heat like animal breath beneath the furs. Can you see Daenerys? I see wings. Bran's pupils expanded, swallowing the glow. A great shadow over ice. Fire stands upon its back. He exhaled, eyelids dropping. But shadows may fall many places. I need more than riddles, Bran. I give what the trees give, Bran whispered, eyes drifting shut. The ravens above shivered as though deciding whether to flee. John bowed his head, turning back toward the walls. Dawn threatened but never arrived. Instead, a pallid smear lingered above the eastern horizon. Snow descended in needles, not flakes, each sliver hard enough to draw blood on exposed skin. Sentries swaddled in bearskins shouted occasional sightings. Moving darkness beyond the tree line, shapes slumped like sacks upon the frozen fields, then silent again. By the 3rd hour of watch, a low groan rose from the forest, one sustained note halfway between horn and avalanche. Every wolf tethered in the kennels threw itself against the bars, howling until they bled. John ordered the trench fires lit. Pitch hissed, ignited, and the flame walls leapt 10 feet high, blue and white at their cores. The snow retreated in rings around the blaze. Lines formed behind the inner palisade. Spearmen from Bear Island, shields of old oak. Knights of House Glover with long haft axes. A motley of knights watch veterans wielding pikes capped in glass the color of onyx. Above them, Manderley bowmen nocked arrows black-fletched with obsidian tips. Ghost padded the line, teeth bared, fur bristling. Tormund stomped up to John, face hidden behind a new-grown beard of rime. He carried a Dragonglass-studded great club over his shoulder. Looks like the fell gods forgot sunrise. He bared his teeth in something not quite a grin. Good. Easier to see their eyes glow. John clasped forearms. Hold the center. If they breach the flame, we rally on you. And if I fall, you won't. John met his blue gaze. You're too ugly to die. Tormund barked a laugh and turned toward his column. John mounted the stairs to the battlements, nodding to Sansa as she marshaled reserve archers. Davos stood at her right hand, a torch in one fist, the other gripping a horn. Arya perched atop the gatehouse roof like a crow in leather. The Hound waited below, helmet under his arm, hating the fires more than the cold, but staying close enough to share their light. The groan from the forest ceased. Silence deeper than before spread over field and wall. Even the flames burned more quietly, as though muffled. Snowflakes froze mid-air, hanging glittering before drifting down an inch, then halting again. Time stuttered like a dying lantern. Something moved between the trees. First one figure, then dozens, then a mass impossible to count. Pale shapes poured forth in uncanny calm, their motions jerky yet inevitable, as though strings guided limbs. They wore the remnants of Ned Stark's guard, of wildling raiders, of Umber men lost days earlier, all now draped in rime and broken flesh. Blue fire glowed in empty sockets. Armored wights held rusted axes, farmers' scythes, shards of ice shaped into spears that dripped no water. Archers loosed at the command shouted by Gerardes. The first volley, red-fletched, rose in graceful arc and fell among the front rank, each impact exploding in white mist as obsidian shattered bone. Bodies tumbled, limbs severed, but those behind crawled over them, heedless. The sea of dead advanced to the trench. Flames leapt higher where pitch pooled, but there the whites slowed, hesitant, as if registering the heat for the first time. Lines buckled, pressed forward again. A giant emerged, skin gray as winter stone, ribs cracked wide, dragging a length of tree trunk. Blue light burned in its skull hollows. It raised the trunk like a club and swung at the trench, scattering burning pitch. Fire splashed across its hide. The creature strode through, patches of skin blazing but unheeded. Jon lifted the horn at his belt and blew 3 sharp blasts. Manderly bowmen switched to black-fletched shafts. They targeted the giant's head, neck, armpits, each arrow landing in cracks of burnt hide. Steam hissed where Dragonglass embedded. The giant's stride faltered. From the rear of the undead host a new sound rose. A cracking croak, rhythmic, unhuman. White winds swept the field, extinguishing tongues of flame. Pitch guttered, shrank, sputtered to embers. The trench line dimmed until only pockets stayed alight. "Them winds," Tormund roared over the clamor. "Fire killing!" Jon leapt from the stair to the outer wall, scanning the tree line. There they stood, a line of pale riders upon dead horses, armor glazed in frost. Among them one figure taller, its crown of jagged ice dark against the hanging snow. The Night King raised one arm. The wind howled, and the remaining flames whirled skyward in spirals before winking out. Whites surged over the charred trench. The first men met them with dragonglass and screams. Spear points pierced jellied flesh. Arrows felled ranks, but still they climbed. The giant crashed against the inner palisade, ripping stakes free. Sandor and a knot of Karstarks met it with blazing brands soaked in pitch, slashing at exposed sinew. A single spear thrown by Gendry buried in the giant's eye socket. Sapphire light shattered. The creature sagged, tearing the palisade down with its bulk. Jon saw the breach and ordered the left reserve forward. Lady Lyanna's bare island spears charged, voices a keen so fierce it pierced the swirling snow. They met the gap head-on, planting shields edge to edge, stabbing between. Every impact sent shards of blue crystal spraying. Lyanna herself fought atop a fallen beam, dagger clutched reverse grip, cutting down the crawling dead as fast as they rose. Ghost leapt from parapet to courtyard, bearing down on a mass of child wights chewing at the ankles of a Manderly knight. The direwolf's jaws closed on skull, crunching like drift ice. Blue light winked out. Ghost bounded on, white coat now patch-spattered red. Jon sprinted for the inner ramp. At its crest he turned, drawing the dragonglass longsword Gendry had forged for him. The blade caught no reflection, darker than night. He charged into the melee, striking where Karstark lines wavered. White flesh parted like brittle parchment. Shattered limbs rained onto snow already stained ink black with corrupted fluid. Arrows hissed overhead Sansa's command. The last volley, white-fletched shafts streaking through gloom, each tip wrapped with oiled cloth aflame. They fell among the enemy like a meteor shower, igniting pitch puddles, setting undead hides ablaze. Fire killed many but illuminated the breach for the whites yet behind. More pressed forth, heedless of burning kin. Metal screamed across the yard. The south gate bulged inward then shattered. Through it lumbered something vaster than the giant before. A mammoth skeleton, tusks rimed in ice, eye sockets ablaze. Atop its spine knelt a white walker, spear of crystal raised. One sweep of that spear struck the stone tower. Frost spider-webbed instantly, cracking mortar as if time itself had sped beneath its touch. Davos sounded retreat horn once, no shame, merely order. Northern infantry fell back step by step, shields interlocked. A healing wind off the fires kept snow at bay but carried acrid smoke. Tormund's club thundered against a white's helm, pulp splattering. Arya vaulted a wagon, burying needle through a walker's neck seam. The creature dissolved in shards of solid cold. She landed light, spinning to cut another. Jon glimpsed the Night King approaching the trench gap, his cloak swirling like a fragment of midnight sky. Every step left frost blossoms. Jon's heart hammered. He started forward, but the mammoth barred path, tusk gouging deep into earth as it charged toward the main gate. Light burst overhead, not lightning, fire. A pillar of gold ripped clouds apart, illuminating the field brighter than noon. Heat washed over wall and vale alike. Snow hissed into steam. Jon's breath caught. Drogon screamed, a sound older than men, wings unfolding like black sails shot with crimson. Fire jetted from his maw, cutting a swath across the forest edge, incinerating whites by the score. Behind him, smaller yet stout, Regal followed, green flame licking between fangs. Above both, Viserion's empty saddle soared ghostly, but the dragon himself, though living, flew riderless, scars gleaming pale across his breast. On Drogon's neck, Daenerys leaned into the wind, hair whipping molten silver. Tyrion clung behind her, face drawn, yet eyes blazing with something between terror and double-fisted hope. They wheeled overhead, torrents of flame lashing. Snow melted to slush where the breaths landed. The mammoth skeleton folded beneath Drogon's fire, tusks collapsing to ash, walker screeching as crystal skin ran like candle wax. The Night King gazed upward, unblinking. He raised his hand. Ice spears formed out of swirling moisture. They launched at Regal. Two shattered against scale. One pierced the membrane of his right wing. The dragon faltered, blood smoking as it fell onto the encroaching horde, crushing dozens, flames sputtering. Daenerys banked Drogon, roaring challenge. The Night King reached for another spear. Jon raced across bodies, climbing fallen timber. The dead surged around him. He cut path after path, his blade singing cold death. Across the courtyard, Arya vaulted a mangonel beam, disappearing into smoke. Davos stood upon the steps of the keep, torch aloft as beacon for fleeing wounded. Drogon dove. Flames engulfed the gap, forming a wall of burning glass. The Night King vanished within the curtain. For a heartbeat, Jon dared hope he'd been consumed. But blue aura flared. Fire parted around swirls of impossibly cold wind. From those flames, the Night King strode and scathed, "I."
Ce spear glistening.
Drogon wheeled, climbing. Jon realized Daenerys meant to circle and strike again. He also saw the Night King cock his arm, spear ready. Too perfect an angle. No time. Jon leapt to a mangonel platform, seized a burning pitch jar, and hurled it down. It burst at the Night King's feet, splattering him with flaming tar and shards of dragonglass. The fire hissed out instantly, but a sliver of black glass embedded at the rim of his breastplate. Frost rolled from the wound like breath reversed. The Night King paused, hand lifting to touch the shard. Blue eyes narrowed. He looked up at Jon. Jon's heart hammered so loud it drowned battle. He raised his sword in challenge or despair. The Night King's lips curled into semblance of a smile. Then he whistled, a sound as thin as glass cracking. Across the field, dead limbs shuddered. Fallen umbers, Manderley's watch rangers jerked upright, eyes rekindling. The bodies Drogon had burned to bone began to rise again, skeletons still smoking. Even the giant's charred corpse twitched, attempting to lift its stump of massive arm. Jon felt the air pull colder. Every warrior still standing sensed the shift. Fear turned to near hopelessness. The wall of the living bent inwards like metal before a forge too hot. High above, Tyrion shouted words lost to wind. Daenerys urged Drogon into a spiral, descending. She was aiming not at the Night King but deeper, toward the heart of the undead host, where perhaps one stroke of dragonfire might create a breach wide enough to scatter control. Jon could only pray. A flare of light exploded to the west, blue, not gold. Jon's eyes cut sideways. Viserion had banked sharply, jaws open, but instead of fire, a torrent of frosted breath erupted, sweeping across the flank of the battlefield. Whites hit by it froze solid, momentarily brittle, then shattered as others crashed through. Yet the blast continued, edging toward Winterfell's wall. Ice crystallized over stone. A merlin cracked, fell in shards. Jon swung down, cursing. The Night King advanced, now flanked by two of his walkers. Spears readied, they approached the base of the inner wall, evidently aiming to scale. Jon rallied the nearest men, Tormund, Lyanna, Davos, and surged to meet them. Dragonglass clashed against crystal. Sparks of black and blue danced, each hotter than flame. Tormund's club smashed into a walker's knee, fracturing it. Lyanna darted beneath, stabbing her dagger into the split armor. The walker exploded in a burst of frost shards. Davos flanked the second, cutting its hamstring with a dragonglass sickle. Jon followed with a downward slash that severed head from spine. Both walkers fell, ice steam curling from wounds. The Night King now faced Jon alone, spear spinning in elegant arcs. Around them the battle seemed to dim, as though distance stretched. Jon raised his sword. Before the first strike landed, a scream split the sky, Bran's ravens. Thousands erupted from the godswood in black torrent, wheeling overhead. They dove, swarming the Night King, beaks stabbing at icy flesh. He swiped, but the birds were too many. Blue eyes flashed irritation. It bought moments only. Jon lunged. The Night King parried with unnatural grace, shaft sliding along obsidian, causing sparks that sounded like chimes. Jon pressed, muscles afire, but each blow met frozen steel. He saw no break in the walker's calm. From the corner of his eye, he spied Arya skimming the battlements. She leapt, sword above the Night King, Valyrian dagger reversed. But he twisted, caught her midair by throat. Her dagger clattered away, sliding across blood-slick stone. Jon roared, swinging at the arm that held her. The blade glanced, shattering into splinters of obsidian. The Night King tightened his grip. Ghost barreled in, fangs closing on the walker's wrist. Blue light flashed and Ghost yelped, flung aside by a backhand strike. Arya choked, struggling. Jon, weaponless save hilt, lunged to tackle. Frost erupted beneath his palms. Pain seared. He clung anyway. A new roar split darkness, dragon, but not Drogon. Regal, bleeding, had clawed free of piled corpses. He inhaled. Flame flickered uncertain in his throat, mingled with blood. Yet he loosed a gout of green-gold fire that engulfed Jon, Arya, and the Night King alike. Jon felt searing heat and a wash of icy numb simultaneously. The world bleached white. When vision cleared, Jon lay sprawled on melted snow, steam curling from scorched mail. Arya coughed nearby, hair singed but living. Between them lay a stain of shattered ice. The Night King? No. The snow cooled, revealing nothing but shards of broken ice spear, smoldering. The Night King was gone. A horn blew from the western rampart, 3 blasts. Jon staggered up, vision swimming. Daenerys, atop Drogon, hovered above the godswood, flame pooling around. She pointed north. The undead were retreating, folding back like a tide drawn home. Tormund hooped ragged triumph. Men cheered breathlessly. John felt none. He watched the retreat, searching for a tall figure among ranks of charred dead. Nothing. The night was not over. Dawn still refusing to break. Yet Winterfell stood. The trench smoldered anew. Bodies lay strewn, too many. The wounded moaned. The fires hissed against falling snow. Daenerys landed within the yard. Her boots touched char-damp stone. Steam curled off Drogon's scales. She strode toward Jon, eyes wide with exhaustion and something harder. "You would not kneel," she said low, though her voice carried like thunder across a gulf. "Yet here I am." Jon wiped blood from his brow. "Here you are." They stood with carnage between them. Shattered ice, broken bodies, weapons smoldering. The fires cast their shadows enormous against the keep walls, making two giants in debate. Behind Jon, Bran's ravens settled upon tower roofs, feathers black against rising gray. The sky's pallid smear lightened by a breath, a suggestion of dawn, frail and ephemeral. The undead had retreated for now, but horizon ward, clouds swelled purple, promising another advance. Daenerys glanced at the wounded, the barrier of fire that still guttered in patches. "We fly north at first light," she said. "We burn every path they may tread." Jon met her gaze. "Not first light. Your dragons must rest. My men must mourn. And while we rest, they gather. Then we gather too." Silence. Her shoulders heaved once. "I saw you leap at him. I failed. You distracted him long enough for my fire."
Assad smiled.
"Perhaps your stubborn north has merit." Jon shook his head. "I doubt he's finished with us." "No." Bran's voice drifted from the stair. "He is not finished." The boy rolled forward, eyes ancient. "He knows what we have now. He searches for cracks. One more night, perhaps two. Then he will come again." Fear slithered along Jon's spine. He looked at Daenerys, at ravaged Winterfell, at the thinning fire trenches. "Then we mend the cracks. And if they widen before we can?" Davos asked, voice harsh with smoke. "Then we fight inside the crack itself," Jon answered. He lifted the shattered hilt of his sword, fragments of dragonglass glittering along broken edge. "And pray the world is larger than the night." Daenerys placed a hand upon his shoulder. "It is Jon Snow, and we will hold it together." Snow drifted, hissing against smoldering pitch. The shapes of the fallen blurred beneath white. Tormund raised a horn of sour ale, crying pledge to sun yet unseen. In every throat the echo rose, raw and ragged, snatching courage from ruin. The first frail light of dawn finally bled across the vale. Gray, uncertain, cold as everything left standing.
No bird sang.
No wind stirred beyond what dragon's wings had churned. Yet the living moved, laying the dead, binding wounds, reforging shattered blades. Fires rekindled, smoke curling heavenward, a warning to the passing cloud that men still clung here. The Night King watched from the northern hills, unseen but seeing, frost glimmering along his crown of jagged ice. Around him his captains clustered, hollow eyes alive with patient blue flame. He raised a hand, fingers trailing vapors of deeper cold. Far below, craters smoked where dragonfire had torn holes, but already the ashes stiffened, coalescing into forms that quivered with new animation. Winter was tireless. It marched upon broken bones and borrowed rage and the endless silence of grave snow. But beneath Winterfell's walls, hearts that beat still dared defiance. Jon Snow walked the rampart one last time before command of sleep claimed him. He looked north. In the distance, the dead gathered like thunderheads. He breathed the blade-sharp air and whispered a single promise, to Ned, to Lyanna, to every voice memory held. "I will not kneel." And the wind carried the words, fragile yet unbroken, across a dawn that had already begun to fade back toward night. Snow drifted in lazy spirals through the shattered courtyard, erasing footprints almost as quickly as they were pressed into the slush. The night's screams had faded to groans, then to the brittle hush of cold air settling across charred stone. By the time the sun fought its pale way above the ragged crenellations, Winterfell looked like a fortress half-carved from a glacier. Walls rimed thick, blood and soot sealed beneath ebony ice that glistened pink in the newborn light. Jon Snow had slept an hour, maybe less. He woke on the bench outside the great hall, armor still buckled, hair stiff with frost sweat. His first sight was a boy of 10 dragging a sled piled with broken arrows and splintered spear shafts toward the forge. His second was the boy stumbling, a wheel snapping from the sled, wooden spokes crunching under iron-shod boots. Jon rose without thinking, lifted the sled's rear, eased the child free. The boy blinked up. Fear, pride, exhaustion warred in hazel eyes too old for that face. "My sister," he said hoarsely, "needs shafts long as her leg. She's on the wall today." "What's her name?" Jon asked. "Elsie Umber." Jon nodded once, then bent and shouldered half the broken shafts himself. "We'll see she's never wanting for arrows." The boy tried to protest, but Jon's grip on the pile was steady. Together they walked to the forge where Gendry and a ring of Bear Island women hammered metal bright again. Inside the forge shed the air quivered like a living thing. Sparks leapt in brilliant chains each time Dragonglass kissed the anvil. Each echo of the hammer seemed to drive the cold back a finger's breadth. Gendry's face was gray soot, cheeks hollow from hours without water, but his arm rose and fell with tireless rhythm. Beside him Lady Lyanna Mormont had discarded her cloak. Sleeves rolled to show wiry muscle roping her forearms as she fed bellows with methodical thrusts. Jon eased the shafts to a cleared bench. "We need new sword blanks," Gendry muttered without pausing. "Long as a ranger's leg, thick as summer sausages. These smaller pieces break too easy against blue steel." "We'll give you everything that's left of the gateposts," Jon said. "Oak seasoned 100 winters. They'll hold." "Good." Hammer rang again. "I'll burn frozen tears out of them." Jon watched molten obsidian flow down a gutter into fresh molds. The white-hot liquid glittered red, then darkened, singing a low, keening song as it cooled. He felt that song vibrate in his teeth. When he turned to leave, Lyanna grabbed his vambrace. "You promised Bear Island a place in the vanguard," she said, voice taut with more than fatigue. "We broke the giant. We hold that claim." "You have it," Jon answered. "You'll stand where the wall gives first." Her chin lifted, satisfied. "See you do not forget. I can roar louder than any beast on your banners." "I've no doubt." Outside, the sun dimmed behind a wall of cloud as though ashamed of its own frailty. The still air felt thinner, like breath taken in a room where someone had been burning candles for days without cracking a window. Jon tasted soot each time he inhaled. Across the yard, Tyrion Lannister paced beside a half-collapsed siege scorpion, parchment in hand. Davos strode at his shoulder, stabbing the air with a quill, arguing over the merits of raising a second trench farther inside the bailey. Tyrion shook his head each time. He seemed to want something grander, as if mathematics might conjure a fortress where stones failed. Jon left them to it and followed a feathering of raven tracks toward the Godswood. There he found Bran beneath the heart tree, wheel tracks scored into new snow. The red leaves wept icicles. A dozen ravens perched along the branches, silent, watching him as one creature with many heads. "Your wolves grow restless," Bran said, eyes still closed. "Ghost hunts a shape beyond the ridge that is not yet living." Jon crouched beside the chair. The air was bitter here, as though the tree drank all warmth and stored it in memory. "Can you see where the Night King has gone?" "North," Bran said at once. His eyelids flickered, pupils flicking side to side behind them. "He circles, restocking his silence, gathering wind. He has lost some power in the wound you gave him, but not enough." "Lost?" Jon's heart leapt. "Then he can be harmed." "Harmed, yes, but that shard you struck him with melts inside him as the two waters meet." Bran's breath clouded, each word slow. "He will not allow it again." "I don't need another chance," Jon insisted. "Only a way to finish what we began." Bran's head moved inches, too heavy or too old for his neck. "Fire licks but does not consume him. Steel shatters. Dragonglass seeps, then dies. There is one true edge left, and it lies in stories older than the wall. Jon waited. Bran's voice softened as though it came from further away. In the far north, beyond even the lands of always winter, the children forged a crown of living flame. No forge, no hammer, only blood and song. They placed it on the head of the first ice shadow to bind him and bred a pact with darkness they could not break. That crown still burns, but only in memory, or in the mind of he who wears its echo. A crown, Jon echoed. If it could be broken, then winter would scatter into snowflakes, each gust its own demise. Can we find it? Bran's lashes lifted. The pupils within were endless. It is not a place. It is woven around him. Tear it loose, he shatters. But crowning flame cannot be taken by mortal hands. Fire forged it. Only something colder than his heart can unbind it. Jon's throat tightened. Colder than death? Colder than forgetting, Bran whispered. Footsteps crunched behind Jon. He turned to see Daenerys standing at the clearing's edge, her cloak half soot, half snow, cheeks raw where ice wind had bitten through dragonscale leather. She dipped her head to Bran, then let her eyes settle on Jon. I've ordered my men to clear a landing circle outside the east parapet, she said softly. Rhaegal needs ground to rest his wing. How bad? Jon asked. Membrane torn to ribbons near the joint. He won't fly again for days, maybe weeks. She closed her eyes. Drogon is weary to the bone. Viserion. Her voice cracked. He obeys no call but instinct now. What flame he has left is frost. I cannot leash him. We'll find another way, Jon murmured. Another way? She laughed, not unkindly. You speak as though roads multiply before us. I see only one path, north, into the dark. Jon glanced at Bran. The boy, the old thing behind the boy, regarded Daenerys without expression. Jon rose. We can't chase him, he said. Not yet. We must hold Winterfell. The North fell once, before Aegon's conquest, to the younger Night's Watch because our fathers thought themselves safe in walls. She stepped closer, voice low enough for ravens alone. What if your walls fail anyway? If he returns tomorrow with a storm to drown your fires? Then we retreat south? Jon asked. Let him take Winterfell? Her silence said she'd considered precisely that. Jon shook his head. I was raised here, he said. Every stone knows my name. The crypts are older than the realms of men. If Winterfell falls, the north cracks to its spine. There'll be nothing between him and the Green Fork. Leave Winterfell to die, Bran intoned unexpectedly, and the winters to come will last forever. He closed his eyes again. Roots remember where trunks are forgotten. The Night King understands that truth better than any of us. That is why he wants this soil. Daenerys sighed, breath white. Then we stand. She looked at Jon. But one more dawn like this and our blades will break against numbers alone. Tyrion's voice floated from the gate trail before they heard his crutch on stone. If numbers are the issue, my queen, I may have a partial solution of arithmetic. He emerged, cloak dragging, quill still behind his ear. I've been taking inventory. He shook parchment. We have 62 casks of wildfire in the vaults beneath King's Landing, untouched since your father's day. How does that help us here? Jon demanded. Because, Tyrion said, a few northern mountain tribes still honor debts owed Iron Hand Lannister from 3 centuries past. I plan to remind them. They have fast goats, sturdy ponies, and a talent for smuggling that would shame Davos himself. He winked at the old knight, who had just trudged up behind him. Smuggling wildfire 200 leagues on winter roads? Davos muttered.
I de suones proud wings.
Oh, wings you may yet have, Onion Knight, Tyrion returned. For we will ride on Rhaegal's back in his stead if goats fail. Daenerys' laugh was weary, but real. If Rhaegal cannot fly, you cannot either, Tyrion. Details, he said, waving the parchment. I'll find another goat. He sobered. But truly, if we can raise those surviving hill clans, lure them here with promise of safe hearth, they might haul enough green fire to give even ice pause. Wildfire burns men the same as whites, Jon said. And dragons the same as both, Daenerys added. Yes, Tyrion conceded. But poured in the trench and lit at the right moment, it could replace flame your dragons can no longer spare. It will burn under wind, under snow, even on water. He thrust the parchment into Jon's hands. These are my sums. Jon scanned lines of cramped writing, distance, grain ration estimates, known clan holds. You trust these numbers? As much as I trust any tally taken when the quill is shaking from cold, Tyrion said. Which is to say, enough to bet lives but not my wine. Daenerys drew breath. Send riders, she said. But not you. Who then? Tyrion asked. All your commanders are needed at the wall. Grey Worm can ride, she said. He is needed to hold the inner gate, Tyrion countered. He knows command like breath. Then I will go, said Davos. I've smuggled stranger trolls than fire. Jon's brows rose. You'd cross the winter roads alone? I'll take 2 Karstark outriders, maybe Glover's best scout. Davos tapped his chest. Stannis once said I could sail through hell with a leaking damper and still make port. I reckon roads easier than sea. Daenerys hesitated only a heartbeat. Go then, Ser Davos. Take what grain you need. If the wildfire comes, you'll have saved us. If not, he bowed. If not, I'll die warm enough from the green flames. The small group dispersed, Tyrion limping toward the ramparts, Davos off to choose mounts, Bran sinking deeper into stillness. Jon remained with Daenerys beneath the weirwood. The ravens stared in their tapestry of black. When this is done, she said quietly, I will ask again for your allegiance. His mouth felt dry. And, if I still refuse, she touched the nearest birch root, tracing frost furrows. Then perhaps the realm will belong to no one but the dead. She looked at him. I don't want that future. Neither do I. They hovered at the edge of something neither had time to define. Then distant horns broke the moment. 4 wails from the south tower. Jon stiffened. Not whites, riders. He and Daenerys hurried toward the gatehouse. A column approached along the White Knife Road. 3 dozen horses, banners bound in leather sleeves to hide colors from far eyes. As they drew near, the sleeves fell, revealing a crowned stag over flaming heart. The sigil of House Baratheon, though gilded not black. Ser Edric Storm rode at the fore. Robert's acknowledged bastard, recalled from Storm's End after Cersei's fall but hitherto silent in southern skirmishes. Snow caked his cloak. His eyes were hard as winter apples. He dismounted, unstrapped his helm. Ser Davos found me 2 days' ride south, he announced. He told me Winterfell might welcome any blade that still remembers the living. He turned, signaling. Behind him, wagons creaked forward carrying kegs banded in iron, each stamped with a crowned lion, the sigil of the Alchemists' Guild. Wildfire. The air itself seemed to recoil. Daenerys stepped forward. We thank you, Lord Storm, but do you understand the risk of what you haul? His grin was bleak. Risk? I brought my new forged lances dipped in pitch. Compared to that, green hell's a candle in a breezeway. Tyrion materialized, running fingers through his ragged beard. I knew a bastard's promise would settle quicker than a lord's oath. He looked at Jon. It appears Summerhall's sorrows may yet redeem old debts. Jon felt how thin their gambit had become, trusting barrels of liquid fire in a wooden-walled courtyard steps from Dragonglass forges. Yet hope flickered. He ordered the kegs rolled into the lower cellars, far from sparks, double-guarded. Word spread. Men whispered about fire that burned blue, about dragons turned into storms. Hope and fear mingled until no one could name which stirred their guts more fiercely. By nightfall, every able body not on the wall helped dig a new inner trench. Children carried torches, lighting the work. Women lugged stones to shore up fresh breaches. The wounded gathered in the sept, singing old northern dirges that curved through beamed rafters like smoke from forgotten hearths. Jon visited each ward, clasped hands, spoke names. He found Tormund reclined against a cartside, rib-bound, snoring louder than a bear. He found Lady Glover sharpening dagger after dagger, her hands trembling only when she sheathed each blade. He found Lyanna Mormont asleep on her feet, leaning against a forge post, hair haloed in embers. At last he allowed himself an hour's collapse on a straw pallet in the crypt entrance. He dreamed of snow piling over his body until he couldn't move. In that white tomb he heard his mother singing a song of old Valyria, though she'd never known the words, and he woke gasping, tears freezing at the corners of his eyes. The second watch reported lights flickering miles to the north, blue lanterns bobbing like corpse fire. The dead were on the march again. Dawn came smeared and gray as damp wool. Wind rose, carrying a smell like old grave dirt disturbed after rain. The trenches were lit with torches soaked in oil. The kegs of wildfire were wheeled into channels carved at the trench base, corks sealed with pitch, fuses coiled across plank bridges ready to be drawn back last moment. Tyrion's plan was simple. Let the horde press the outer brim, then flood the ditch with green hell. If it worked, a ring of deathless flame would encircle Winterfell long enough to break any charge. If it failed, no one spoke of that. Daenerys climbed atop the battlements, a vantage from which she could see Drogon sprawled on the clearing beyond, wings half-folded, chest rising slow. Beside him Rhaegal lay curled, injured wing draped in sailcloth soaked with boiled resin and herbs. Maesters scuttled about the wound like ants repairing a broken hive. Viserion was nowhere in sight, a hole in the sky where his shape should be. Jon joined her, clasped the crenel edge. Below, Manderley pikemen shifted in tight squares, their breath fogging in synchronized gusts. Karstark archers lined the second tier. Bear Island spears anchored the gate. Ghost paced opposite Jon, ears flat, hackles bristled at a threat still invisible to common sight. A hush fell as first flakes spiraled down. They were larger than before, each one shaped like a perfect six-point star, edges razor crisp. They did not melt upon the ground. They nested, one upon another, building a lace of crystalline glass that glimmered azure. Jon felt a cold so deep it seemed to drain marrow from bones. Then, from the gloom beyond the forest edge, came a sound like 1,000 branches snapping all at once. The tree line buckled. Figures emerged, marching in ranks for deep, silent, unhurried. The wind died. The world narrowed to the space between wall and horde. A single horn from the watchtower, Jon's signal. Arrows flew. Dragonglass tips punched through rotted mail, burst skulls. Bodies toppled to vanish beneath the press of those behind. But the mass never slowed. The first whites reached the trench, piling upon each other until they formed a bridge of twisting limbs. Tyrion stood atop the southern barbican, torch poised above a fuse line. He waited until the trench brim heaved with corpses. Then he dropped the brand. It hissed, sputtered, vanished into snowpack. Nothing. Panic rippled. Tyrion knelt cursing, trying to relight a second torch. The air itself seemed to drink flame. Sparks went dark before they left steel. Wildfire would not kindle. Jon saw it, felt his stomach clench. The Night King's cold fought even unnatural fire. Daenerys stepped onto the crenellation, hands cupped around lips. "Dracarys!" she screamed. Drogon stirred. With titanic effort he pushed to haunches, wings beating once, twice. A gout of fire erupted, red gold. It arced downward, seared through falling snow, struck the trench at Tyrion's quadrant. Green erupted, vast and sudden, a geyser of emerald fury shooting skyward. The heat slammed the wall. Snow vaporized. Jon staggered, hair whipping back. Wildfire caught along the fuse lines, racing around the ditch in both directions. Where it ran, whites blackened, charred, disintegrated to clumps of smoldering chalk. The trench became a moat of flame that consumed snow faster than any blizzard could refill it. The whites' advance stalled. Ranks splintered. Yet the Night King had learned. Wind walls rose behind the dead, funneling smoke downward, choking the moat's breath. Jon ordered archers to flaming arrows. The new shafts carried pitch that burned through the wind. Green lines leapt again. For a space of heartbeats, the flames held. A roar above, the sky split. Viserion dove from the west, frostfire yawning from shattered jaw. He slammed into the flame wall, white breath engulfing green, snuffing portions to hissing glass. Whites poured through the gaps before defenders could plug them. The battle renewed inside the moat. Jon drew Longclaw's Dragonglass replacement. Fused steel core, black glass edge, lifted it high. Beside him, Arya spun twin blades she'd coaxed from Gendry's kiln. Sansa knocked an obsidian-tipped bolt to the scorpion Tyrion had salvaged. Bran's ravens screamed. Tormund's bellow answered in thunder. What followed was chaos stripped of music. A din of steel hitting ice flesh, of skulls cracking beneath mace heads, of dragons roaring as their brother's breath clashed in midair, flame against frost. Jon lost track of time, of hurt. He fought atop bodies slippery with half-frozen gore, stabbing, parrying, hacking again. Everywhere, blue eyes glowed like lanterns smashed across a battlefield. Somewhere behind, ghosts of children screamed. The crypts breached? No, only whined through gate slats, he hoped. He remembered Bran's words. Only something colder than forgetting can unbind the crown. Dragonglass was not enough. Fire was not enough. What remained was memory itself, memory older than men. He needed the children, yet none lived south of the wall. None but. Jon turned toward the heart tree. Even amid slaughter, the godswood shimmered, blood-red branches, trunk pale, sap thick with the world's oldest stories. When the children carved faces, they left their magic behind. Could it cut deeper than Dragonglass? He fought toward it, calling ghosts to heal. Arya appeared at his flank, covering gaps. Together they slashed a path through a knot of whites, bones flying. They crossed the godswood threshold. Snow beneath the heart tree glowed faintly rose where torchlight sank through red leaves. Bran waited, motionless, eyes clouded. The ravens scattered at Jon's arrival, swirling, then settled again on branches heavy with frost. "Tell me how," Jon demanded, voice ragged as torn silk. Bran's lips parted. "The weirwoods remember. Touch the heart face with a blade of living blood and speak the word that called the first men across the sea." Jon frowned. "I don't know that word." "You do," Bran whispered. "It is the name Ned murmured at your cradle when he swore you true." Bran's gaze refocused, piercing. "Say it, plunge the blade, and the tree will drink the future you choose." Arya's breath steamed. "What blade?" she asked. Jon's thoughts raced. "Ice that bites beyond death. Blood that lives." "Valyrian steel," he said at last. "It was folded with dragonfire, the hottest any forge has seen. Heat enough to temper memory into steel." Arya drew the dagger she'd once saved Bran with, the one that nearly ended his life. Jon saw his face reflected in its ripple, half frost, half soot. She offered it hilt first. "It's yours," she said. "No," he told her, pushing her hand back. "You'll need it when I'm gone." She didn't flinch. "We'll both need it to end this. But you know the word, brother." "Not I." Jon closed cold fingers round the hilt. He felt weight far greater than metal, the length of every choice since first snow. He approached the heart tree. The carved face watched him, eyes red sap that looked like tears of blood. Snowflakes melted before touching bark, revealing spider-fine cracks that glowed faint. He pressed the blade to his palm. Blood welled scarlet. He set the wound against the tree's cheek. Sap and blood mingled, steaming. Then he whispered the name Ned Stark had given him before any other. Jaehaerys. A tremor pulsed through ground and trunk. Frost cracked outward in rings. The heart tree's eyes blazed, mouth splitting wider. Jon thrust the dagger into the groove beneath its lips. Light flared, colorless, blinding. A sound like every raven crying at once tore the air. Jon staggered back, shielding his eyes. The world snapped to silence. Beyond the godswood gate, screams of battle paused. Wind ceased. Even dragons' roars fell mute. For a heartbeat, the realm hung between breaths. Then ice shattered everywhere. Whites collapsed as marionette strings were cut. Blue fires winked out, Frost-sheeting stones burst into glitter dust. The wildfire moat roared anew, as if vacuum had sucked fresh oxygen into the flames. In the stillness, an inhuman scream rose from the north side of Winterfell, shrill, furious. Jon knew it before turning. The Night King felt his crown unmake. He emerged into the courtyard to see the ancient enemy striding toward him, cloak billowing in shards of ice. But something trembled in the Night King's bearing, head tilted, steps uneven. Cracks veined the crystal of his breastplate. The shard Jon had embedded earlier glowed cherry inside that split. The Night King raised his spear, but ice sloughed from its tip, dripping like melting glass. Jon advanced, sword in hand. A shadow swept overhead, Drogon, wings battering. Daenerys rode bareback, no saddle or chain. She saw Jon below, saw the Night King falter. She guided Drogon into a dive. Frostfire from Viserion arced behind, but Drogon banked, flame tearing through the air to intercept. Red and white fire collided, erupting in a cyclone that crashed into the courtyard, vaporizing snow, hurling men aside like straw. Jon almost lost footing. He sprinted through steam. The Night King staggered within the maelstrom, ice armor sloughing. Jon closed distance. The Night King's gaze tracked him. Still intent, still lethal. A figure flashed past, Arya, leaping, dagger raised. The Night King turned, caught her by wrist. But Ghost barreled in, seizing his calf. Ice cracked. The Night King stumbled. Arya twisted free, cutting deep into that wound left by Dragonglass. Blue light sprayed like sparks. Jon shouted, swung. Valyrian steel met the fissure and sank. The Night King seized Jon's throat with one hand, squeezing. Ice spread across Jon's jaw, numbing. He drove forward deeper until pommel met chest. I screamed, high, excruciating. Jon spoke one word he did not recognize. Some syllable the heart tree had whispered into his blood. The Night King's grip faltered. Blue flame flickered, turned white, then shattered into motes as fine as snow. Armor fell away like glass released by its own cold. The Night King unraveled. First wrist, then shoulder, torso fracturing into shining dust that caught sunlight and vanished. A hush deep and total settled across Winterfell. Whites collapsed, dead at last. Frost melted from walls. Snow resumed falling in lazy spirals, but ordinary now, soft, wet, no edge to its kiss. Jon swayed. Arya steadied him, hands hot despite frigid air. Ghost sat beside them, wine low. Above, Drogon landed. Daenerys slid off, boots crunching. She crossed the corpse-strewn yard to Jon. His sword tip rested on ground. He felt gravity like grief. It's done, she said. He shook his head, tears thawing into streaks. It started. He looked around. Broken bodies, shattered stone, dragons bleeding, banners burnt. We won't forget. She took his shoulders, rested her forehead against his. No, she whispered. We won't. Wind stirred banners, but gently now. The sun broke the cloud, thin gold casting long shadows over the snow-dappled yard. Ravens circled overhead in slow, languid spirals, no longer shrieking, only watching. Men emerged from hiding, rangers, smiths, widows wielding butcher knives. Children peered from cellar doors, faces smeared with soot. One by one, they realized the silence meant survival. Skies rang with a cheer raw and ragged as a wound knitting closed. Sansa, standing atop the inner gate, raised a horn in salute. Tormund lifted his club high. Lyanna Mormont sank to knees amid the wounded and sobbed openly, but with joy. Jon stepped away from Daenerys, crossed fallen timbers to Bran, who had rolled from the Godswood. Bran's eyes were clear, though ancient still. He nodded once. The crown broke, he said simply. What of the wind? Jon asked. It will always blow, Bran replied, but it will forget this shape. Jon looked north. The sky there began to lighten, an icy blue paling. No walls of storm moved anymore. Only distant mountains glowed with first hints of sunrise not tainted by death's pall. He sheathed the sword. Days of reckoning lay ahead. Graves to dig, lords to placate, dragons to heal, kingdoms to rebuild. South of the Neck, the Game of Thrones waited, sharpened by rumor that the North now wielded broken winter and unbroken honor alike. But for a moment longer, Winterfell breathed in unison, one vast lung exhaling relief. Jon raised his voice. "We live," the Yard answered, echoing from every throat, even those too weary to stand. "We live." Daenerys's watching eyes shone wet, reflecting the new sun. Tyrion leaned on his crutch, a crooked smile bent by disbelief. Davos returned on a fresh horse, cheeks cracked, wildfire burns on gauntlets, but alive, leading a train of mountain clansmen bearing more kegs. He looked at the green liquid, then at the blue sky, laughter booming. And somewhere in that laughter, in the hush before new snows, Jon Snow felt the world tilt, toward spring, perhaps distant, but promised, toward stories yet unwritten, toward thrones unknelt to, crowns undesired, and fires remembered in Heartwood long after embers cooled. For in the end, no knee had bent, no promise broken, only winter itself, shattered by a name spoken in blood against a tree that remembered. And so the North stood, battered yet unbowed, as the first true sunlight of the new age spilled across ramparts older than kings, warming stone, warming steel, warming hearts that feared they might never feel its grace again. The wind across the broken ramparts carried a new timbre, no longer the hollow whistle of empty battlements but the rustling murmur of hands at work, of wagons groaning under salvage, of hammers striking in steady, hopeful cadence. Where the Night King's storm had boiled hours earlier, a pale sky arched unmarred by roiling clouds, painted in faint pinks that bled into the bleached blue of midwinter dawn. Winterfell's courtyard, so recently a charnel ground, bustled with deliberate motion. Masons half-dragged, half-rolled rubble into neat berms. Bare island spears formed work details to hoist shattered gates upright. Manderly cooks stirred a broth of hare and barley in cauldrons the size of small boats, each swirl of the ladle sending perfume across men who had forgotten they possessed hunger. Jon Snow wondered how a place could alter so swiftly, from theater of apocalypse to forge of restoration. Yet he felt the shift deeper than stone, inside marrow that seemed lighter now, unburdened by a dread he had carried so long that its absence felt first like numbness. He watched a pair of Karstark lads, one with a sling binding his shoulder, lift a breastplate discarded by a fallen wight. The plate's icy glaze crackled free under morning sun, revealing the rusted sigil of a watchman from some forgotten ranger. They treated it with respect, laying it upon a bier of kindling destined for the flames. Godswood protocol decreed no corpse of ice should be buried, no relic of it stored. Fire cleansed, ash remembered nothing. Beyond them, Daenerys strode beneath a standard that once bore the direwolf alone but now was quartered crudely. Direwolf, three-headed dragon, merman, flayed man, stitched overnight by northern women who believed heraldry could stitch hearts as well. Her silver hair whipped free of braids. Soot still smudged her cheek where she had wiped sweat in the heat of Drogon's second dive. She conferred with Lady Sansa, voices low yet impassioned. Curiosity tugged at Jon, but duty tugged harder. The dead must be counted. The living tallied for rations. Wounded triaged by severity. He knelt beside Maester Gerardes, who sorted clay tablets recording which hostages had been turned and which freed. Every sixth name bore a circle in blood beside it, irretrievable, destined for pyres already burning on the northern ridge. Toward noon, the surviving giants of the Black Brothers rode in from Eastwatch. 10 men only, but each dragging sledges laden with bundles. Arrows, coils of hemp, sacks of obsidian still untouched. They brought news that the wall at Eastwatch cracked but did not fall and that sea ice was clearing near the gorge. Jon clasped their forearms one by one. "We stood," he said, and each man's eyes brightened despite grief etched in crow's feet. In the weirwood shade Bran communed in whispers with children too young to wield sword yet old enough to recall where the Night King's scream ended inside their skulls. They asked him what the ravens saw now. He told them of a white bear roaming Everwinter fjords no longer, driven by bitter command, of wolves returning to the King's Road in packs unified rather than scattered, of the winds shifting so subtly that a maester's glass may not yet record but the trees felt first. They asked whether snow would cease tomorrow. Bran only smiled, an ancient, patient curving of lips, and said tomorrow belonged to men again. The weather answered not to crowns of ice but to clouds and chance. As the sun climbed, banners of houses thought dead found sunlight again. Cerwin green above a boar's tusk, Hornwood's bull moose crimson and silver, even the broken gray of House Tallheart carried by 3 survivors who had hidden in a root cellar through the worst of the siege. Wherever such standards appeared, groups coalesced, each cluster relieved to discover a remnant of kin and place. Jon's heart clenched when he saw small Jon Umber's youngest cousin. A girl all of 16, one eye clouded with frostbite, lift the last hearth banner no higher than her shoulder, yet high enough that Umber men flocked to her. He wondered what future could be fashioned from so jagged a mosaic, then reminded himself a future unmade was better than none. By twilight the pyres lined the old godswood glade. 6 great stacks, each crowned by oiled cloth. Wildfire had been bled carefully along trenches outside the curtain walls where residue still hissed, but here only ordinary flames would consume flesh and bone. Davos oversaw application of pitch as though baptizing the dead. Tyrion read the names, those he could recognize, voice steady until he reached the list of Dothraki cut down after charging the right flank. The syllables of an unfamiliar language broke across his tongue and he faltered, blinking hard. Grey Worm finished the recitation for him, speaking each fallen rider's name in clipped cadence, as if striking a gong for spirits to hear. Jon stepped forward last. He did not speak. He simply took the torch from Davos' hand and touched it to the first pyre. Flame climbed with ferocity that startled those near. Sap steamed from green wood, split, then roaring pillars leapt skyward. Others approached, one by one. Lyanna Mormont, Arya, Sandor Clegane, even Lady Sibel Glover who walked with a limp from a frozen arrow wound. Each lit a pyre, each whispered something no one else could catch. When the 6th stack blazed, sparks spiraled into a wind now gentler. They drifted over ramparts as though sowing the promise of warmth beyond the walls. Night settled. Instead of fear, the castle thrummed with subdued celebration. Exhausted laughter, cups of mulled cider, songs half remembered, half invented. Jon found himself at a trestle table with Tormund, Gendry, and 2 spearwives. They shared a wheel of hard cheese unearthed from the Wintertown storehouses and Tor bread still half raw from newly stoked ovens. Tormund boasted that he'd once bedded a she-bear larger than Drogon's shadow and that she'd given him fur thicker than any cloak. Gendry countered by recounting how the forge heat was hotter than dragon flame if one stoked bellows properly. Jon laughed, stunned at the sound. For the first time since Hardhome, mirth felt neither betrayal nor armor, just release. Yet tasks lingered. Near midnight he slipped from hall to rampart, seeking solitude. Snow crunched underfoot. He gazed north where hill outlines loomed dark against an aurora of flickering jade, remnants of the wildfire glow reflecting off high clouds. No movement stirred those hills. He allowed himself to breathe without vigilance tightening his shoulders. Soft steps approached, the measured stride of Lady Sansa. She joined him, cloak trimmed in white fox fur, copper hair catching firelight from the courtyard braziers. For a while they spoke nothing. Then she asked, "Do you feel it?" As if the land itself inhales. "Ido." Jon traced the parapet's frost crystals with a glove. "I also feel a silence waiting to ask, and now? Now we bury, rebuild, and reckon." Her voice carried the weight of ledgers and grain tallies, of letters yet to send. Who rules south of the neck when word spreads the Winter King has fallen? The Iron Throne will see weakness in our cost. Or strength, Jon said. We stood where others would break. Sansa watched him keenly. "I saw how she looked at you, and how you looked back." He shifted against the stone. "We share something forged in death. But thrones?" He let the word dangle, a snowflake melting before landing. She nodded. "The realm won't let you ignore thrones forever. Nor her. Be careful, Jon." She squeezed his forearm, then descended steps toward the hall lights. Jon remained. When he finally turned back, he nearly collided with Tyrion perched against a merlin, nursing a cup. "Eavesdropping," Jon said, tone mild. Limping actually, Tyrion replied, rubbing his hip. Impossible to avoid conversations when they happen where my aching bones have stopped me. He sipped. But yes, interesting talk of thrones. Jon exhaled. Not tonight. Very well. We'll discuss in the morning. 7 hells no politics can wait 10 hours. Tyrion sniffed the air. Do you smell that? Smoke. No, beyond spring. He shrugged. Perhaps my broken nose imagines fragrances the realm forgot. Jon allowed a small smile. Rest, Tyrion. We'll fashion courts and councils later. On one point I agree wholeheartedly. Later. Tyrion raised the cup in loose salute, then hobbled toward the tower stair. When the castle finally quieted, Jon descended to the crypts. A single lantern guided his path through moisture-slick corridors honeycombed with memories turned to stone. He passed statues of Stark kings who'd ruled before dragons ever crossed seas, their granite eyes fixed on perpetual vigil. At Ned Stark's effigy he knelt, fingers brushing the direwolf carved at his father's feet. The lantern cast flickering shadows across the statue's calm face. I did not bend, Jon whispered. The vault echoed his tremulous breath. Yet the realm bends whether I will or no. Guide me, Father. Tell me how to serve without surrender. No reply but the drip of water seeping through earth. He remained until the lantern guttered low, then climbed to the yard to bed at last. Ghost followed, curling at his side like snow piled against a door, mute, protective. Dawn of the second day unveiled a realm altered again. Overnight the temperature had risen by an imperceptible thread. Frost on spear points wept clear beads. Icicles shrank, pattering like tinkling bells. Ravens flew in loops across the sky, not to warn but almost in play. Some men wept openly at the sight of plain gray clouds instead of the bruised thunderheads that had marched ahead of the dead. Council assembled in the carved oaken solar above the great hall. Present, Jon, Daenerys, Sansa, Tyrion, Davos, Bran, Lyanna Mormont, Lord Edric Storm, Lady Sibel Glover, and Grey Worm in silent attendance behind his queen. Gendry arrived late, wiping forge grit from his hair, but none rebuked him. Tyrion tapped the parchment before Jon. We must decide distribution of grain, timber, and dragonglass now, before rivalries rekindle. He gestured at a map redrawn to include scorch marks where inner keep walls had collapsed. Winterfell holds, but barely. Roads north are broken by war. Riverlands face flooding come thaw. If food does not flow, victory curdles into civil strife. Sansa unrolled her own scroll. White Harbor's granaries remain 2/3 full. Lady Manderly pledges half to Winterfell if we protect the port. Carhold smokehouses survived, but they lack salt. We must send brine wagons. The mountain clans offer goats and iron or for nails. She eyed Daenerys. And dragon transport for urgent supplies could restore lines weeks faster than wagons. Grey Worm shifted, silent gaze on Jon. Daenerys considered. Drogon needs rest. Rhaegal cannot bear weight yet. But once they heal, moving grain seems a worthy use of wings. She looked at Jon. If the North accepts dragons overhead. Jon inclined his head. So long as they bring bread, not fire. Tyrion cleared throat. Speaking of fire, King's Landing. He placed a second sheet forward bearing Cersei's lion crowned. Reports before Ravens fell silent place Queen Cersei reinforcing the city with sellswords purchased through Braavosi intermediaries. News of the Night King's march may reach her today, tomorrow. She will spin our weakness. Daenerys' eyes hardened. She will face dragons and the combined armies of North and Reach. Jon looked to Sansa, whose lips pressed. The North cannot march yet, she said. We must rebuild walls, bury dead, harvest stores, mend fields scoured by frost. A month, perhaps 2 before banners can ride. Edric Storm spoke for the first time, Stormlander cadence brisk. The Stormlands owe blood debt to Lannisters and Targaryens alike. Yet my men also lie broken. Cersei counts on exhaustion more than swords. A siege of King's Landing will spill innocent blood, Davos added. Wildfire caches still line her streets. One spark, 10,000 charred. Daenerys met his gaze unflinching. I will not turn my back on a tyrant because her walls cradle victims. Jon lifted a hand. The living just fought a war to save all. Let us not squander that unity on old vengeance. He turned to Bran. Can your sight tell us Cersei's next move? Bran's pupils widened, reflecting something distant. She sharpens fear. She will claim dragons bring winter south, that the dead left because they reached their allies here. She will sow doubt until each lord wonders whether the North invented a threat to weaken the realm. Lyanna snorted. Let her come see the bones herself. She will not travel north, Bran said. She will send ravens heavy with lies. Daenerys stood, pacing to the slit window. Snowmelt dripped from the sill. Then we fly a raven louder, truth on dragon wings. Jon's brow furrowed.
You propose à Tours.
Yes, she faced them. Drogon carries me to White Harbor, then Gulltown, the Fingers, the Twins. Every lord who doubts will see ice corpses charred by dragon flame. I'll bring survivors to speak. If Cersei spins tales, let them be drowned by louder witness. Tyrion tapped quill. A royal progress, but airborne. It risks much. Cersei may dispatch scorpions upriver. Scorpions cannot reach clouds, Daenerys said. I will keep heights. Grey Worm inclined head. Unsullied escort rides below. Dothraki scouts at flanks. Sansa looked to Jon. If the queen shows charity by ferrying grain and truth, some northern hearts may soften. Jon rubbed his jaw. And if they soften too far? The North fought for self-rule before wolves met dragons. Kings in the North were crowned widowed by southern steel. Daenerys's shoulders tensed. I seek no conquest of hearts by fear, only alliance. Bran's voice drifted. Alliance rooted in shared memory of darkness. He leaned forward. Let each lord bear witness at Winterfell. Summon a great council. Reforge the pact of the realms of men. Not by fire and sword, but by oath and story. Silence sprawled. Tyrion raised brows. A council, lords, ladies, free folk, maesters, Dothraki calls, perhaps? Unprecedented. Necessary, Bran answered. The living differ, yet each keeps a part of the world alive. To forget is to invite another night. Jon exhaled. Memory again, the weapon Bran had said could unbind crowns. So be it, he said. Send ravens to every corner. In one moon's turn, a council will convene at Winterfell to decide how we move south together. Until then, we rebuild.
Daenerys nadit grave assent.
I will show wings but not war, aid not fire. Sansa surveyed the room, calculating. Then we must feed thousands of guests. Begin storing venison, dry apples, salt fish. She rolled her scroll. I'll see the granaries measure thrice. Council broke after midday bell. Lyanna marched to Bear Island Quarter to rally spearwives to hunt. Tyrion sought Bran's counsel on Dreamlore, scribbling furiously. Davos oversaw Wains carrying fallen stone to patch the curtain wall breach. The day passed in feverish coordination. Jon spent the afternoon training new recruits, farmers and potters who had survived first assault unarmed but now insisted on spear drills. He corrected stance, reminded them war might come again from Cersei, pirates, or Ironborn. The sword you raise next may defend a harvest, not a wall, he said. Swing with purpose, not rage. That night, Daenerys met him atop the Rookery Tower. Storm lanterns threw halos across their faces. Beyond, Drogon rested curled around a toppled trebuchet like a cat with its toy. She gestured at the quiet yard. I dreamed of this as a girl, people free beneath my wings. Yet I wonder if they will ever see me as more than flame. Jon leaned on crenellations. Flame saved them. Fear lingers. But fear cools. Gratitude roots deeper. She studied him. Thank you for trusting me with your home. He met her violet eyes. Thank you for trusting me with your fire. She stepped closer. Breath mingled. Old instincts, shaped by battle, not courtship, bade him step back, but he did not. She rested a gloved hand over his, warm despite air. The rookery ravens rustled as though aware of history turning. Words, pledges, confessions might have followed, but the sky tore with a shriek. Viserion slashed overhead, frosted wings trailing blue sparks. He spiraled once above the godswood, then streaked south, vanishing into night. Daenerys watched, sorrow etched in silhouette. "He flees what he cannot understand," she whispered. "I fear he may never return." "Perhaps he seeks a place where ice still whispers," Jon offered. "Dragons feel what men can't." She nodded, though tears glimmered. "The world is changed. Even dragons need new skies." They parted with promise to meet at dawn. Over the next weeks, Winterfell stirred like a wounded bear healing under spring sun. Snow retreated. Mud replaced it in rutted lanes. Blacksmiths quenched new hinges. Carpenters raised scaffolds on east wall. Children skittered between legs of unsullied on watch, giggling when stoic soldiers stooped to return dropped doll heads. In the library, old Maester Gerardi's unfurled parchment saved from the citadel, treatises on crop rotation, husbandry, irrigation. Gifts, he said, could do more good now than any sword. He set apprentices copying diagrams, ink splattering across fresh calfskin. Ravens came, accepting Winterfell's invitation. Banners of Arryn blue, Tully silver trout, Baratheon crowned stag, Tyrell golden rose, house symbols charred by the War of the Five Kings, but none irrevocably. Even Dorne sent a single cloak-pin sealed letter. The new prince pledged envoy to council, though sandstorms delayed departure. No raven arrived from the rock. Casterly's silence mirrored Cersei's tightening hold. One crisp morning, Daenerys strode to the yard wearing riding leathers the color of obsidian. Drogon crouched behind her, wings stretched and healed. A cargo net bulged with sealed crates, parchments, scroll tubes, sacks of oats. It was the first aerial dispatch. Proof dragons could serve as couriers. Jon supervised rigging. He tied knots until fingertips stung. When ready, she mounted. Drogon launched, creating whirlwinds that toppled barrels. Children cheered. Sansa, hair bound in a modest braid, shaded her eyes and watched until dragon and queen dwindled to a speck across azure. That evening Jon found Sansa atop the outer parapet, lips chapped by wind but eyes bright. "I thought I hated dragons," she confessed, "but seeing one bear parchment and seed instead of doom, it may heal something inside all of us." He smiled. "If the maids of Wintertown begin naming newborns Drogon, we'll know peace has truly settled." She laughed, a sound he had seldom heard from her since childhood. As weeks passed, caravans arrived daily. Wagons from White Harbor heavy with grain, carts laden with barrels of Arbor gold, a gift from Lady Tyrell. Even a flotilla of fishing skiffs pulled upriver to deliver salted cod. Refugees trailed behind, hoping the rebuilt winter town could shelter them. Jon ordered unused barracks opened. Stone hearths blazed again. Training yards thudded with drill. Gendry unveiled rows of dragonglass-edged plowshares for farmers, as deadly to soil as to would-be raiders. Lyanna Mormont oversaw archery competitions, awarding carved bear-tooth tokens to every child who struck target beyond 30 paces. She claimed Bear Island would field the first company of girl archers to outshoot any southern knight. Tyrion, with Bran's guidance, compiled a book of the Long Night, chronicling each vision, each tactic. Maesters from Old Town begged copies. Tyrion insisted it be free to all, scribed in common tongue, not sealed in towers. "Knowledge kept in vaults breeds ignorance," he said. "We will not forget again." When the moon turned full, the first delegates arrived for council. They camped in sprawl of pavilions outside Winterfell. Bright silks of Dornish, austere blue tents of the Vale Knights, willow-green marquees from the Trident. Free folk pitched hides beyond the rampart shade, fires crackling with savory hare stew. The air hummed with accents seldom intermingled without clash. Yet no brawl erupted. Perhaps memory of shared terror still leavened pride. Jon met each envoy, ghost padding at heel. He offered bread and salt, though stores were stretched. In return, envoys offered gifts: casks of olive oil, wrought glass lamps, bolts of Myrish lace. Symbols, not sustenance, but tokens of respect. On the eve of council, a final entourage rode under torches. Gilded armor, standards of a black stag quartered with a gold lion. Lord Gendry Baratheon of Storm's End, legitimized by royal writ Daenerys, had penned after reading Robert's confession letter smuggled from old Maester Pycelle's archive. With him came men wearing crimson cloaks but half-lions on shields. Lannister cousins who had deserted the Rock after Cersei seized grain to feed her sellswords. They sought pardon and purpose. Jon granted them guest right. Sansa eyed them sharp, but agreed mercy cost less than renewed war. Dawn of the Council found Winterfell's yard transformed into open forum. Carpentry crews had erected a simple dais framed by the heart trees felled kin. 2 trunks carved into arching shapes reminiscent of clasped hands. No throne, no raised seat save a plain oaken bench for the infirm. Jon stood beside Sansa at dais center. Daenerys arrived flanked by Grey Worm but without crown, hair loose save one braid bound with dragonbone. She took position opposite Jon. Between them, Bran in his chair. Ravens lined the arch overhead, silent witnesses. Tyrion spoke first, voice amplified by hush. He recounted the long night's rise, the unity that shattered it, the cost in blood. He gestured at Jon and Daenerys. Here stand ice and fire woven not to rule but to mend. He invited each envoy to speak grievances, hopes, fears. One by one they mounted the dais. Lady Jane Stone of the Mountain Clans asked that roads be patrolled so small folk could bring cheese and or south without fear of Ironborn. Edric Storm pledged lances to guard them if northern grain flowed to Storm's End. Lord Jon Royce requested Maester schools be built in Vale villages where superstition stifled progress. A Dornish envoy, Maester Merriam Sand, offered windcatch designs to irrigate parched fields of the Red Mountains, blueprints Bran had seen in vision of ruined cities far across the sea. Day stretched. Sun-warmed faces until cloaks were shrugged away. Laughter-peppered discourse as improbable alliances formed. Bear Island sharing shipwrights with Sister Tun. Dothraki horsemasters agreeing to teach light. Cavalry tactics to Riverlanders. Maesters promising to translate the Book of the Long Night into Dothraki script. When twilight tinted sky with amber, Jon took step forward. He removed the direwolf pin from his cloak, held it high. I am king in the north by declaration of my people. Yet I stand before you to say the North's strength came not from crown but from unity. We beg no yoke, but we offer no walls, not to those who fought beside us, not to children yet to come. He extended the pin to Sansa. She accepted, then placed it on table's plain wood. Daenerys mirrored him, unclasping a dragon brooch wrought of obsidian. I crossed narrow sea believing the realm mine by birth, by fire, by conquest. But the dead cared nothing for birthright. They yielded only to those who remembered we are brothers beyond banners. If thrones bind us to cycles of fear, let thrones be tools, not chains. She laid her brooch beside Jon's pin. Murmurs rippled. Some lords gaped, unmoored by sight of crowns surrendered. Others whispered approval. Bran's voice rose, carrying impossible weight despite softness. I remember the first pact under leaf and stone when children and first men exchanged blades for peace. They carved their promises into trees so memory would not fade. Let us carve anew. He gestured to arch of trunks. Lay your sigils here, not above each other, but intertwined. One by one, envoys approached. A Vale Knight pressed a steel falcon emblem into sapwood. A Manderly scribe carved the Merman crest alongside. Dornish etched a spear-pierced sun. Free folk cut simple runes of mountains and lightning. Even the Lannister cousins added half-lions, though smaller, respectful. When carving ended, the arch resembled mosaic of the realm, each grain of wood darkened by fresh pitch ceiling. Tyrion raised a flagon. To the Pact of Winterfell. Voices responded, a chorus unpracticed but powerful. Cups clinked. Jon felt Sansa's hand slip into his, felt Daenerys's on his other arm, felt Bran's quiet certainty like roots beneath stone. He lifted eyes to sky, faint dusting of stars just kindling. No comet, no portent, just distant specks of possible worlds. Council adjourned, but night lingered vibrant. Musicians coaxed melodies from stripped gut strings. Dothraki drums met reed flutes. Children danced in loops round brazier embers. Later, Jon walked the ramparts alone. Tents glowed warm across fields. Laughter and argument wove tapestry of life continuing. Ghost padded silent. Jon scratched behind one white ear. He asked himself what came next. Cersei remained, her throne a wound yet to cauterize. Essos beckoned with unknown upheavals. Dragons might one day breed again or vanish. The North would struggle through seasons of planting and forgetting before scars of ice truly faded. He felt uncertain and content in uncertainty. Footsteps joined him. Daenerys. She carried no torch. Drogon's ember eyes far below provided ambient glow. She leaned on the parapet, eyes reflecting moon just risen. "We will need some form of council," she said, "to resolve disputes. 100 perhaps, with chairs for each house and tribe." Jon smiled. "Let's master feeding and housing them first." She laughed softly. "You think like a steward. Perhaps I am. Stewards watch the realm when kings chase glory. Then I hope you will watch with me," she whispered. He looked at her, saw not conqueror or queen but comrade whose path crossed his at the world's edge. Always, they stood so until stars wheeled overhead. Wind smelled of thaw, wet earth, old leaves stirring beneath snow, the far promise of shoots spearing ground. Somewhere deep in forest, an owl hooted, alone, alive, curious about a world altered. Far to the south, Cersei Lannister paced her own ramparts, reading raven reports of alliances forged under direwolf banners. Her nails bit palms, her crown felt heavier. She ordered scorpion crews doubled, Sel's words drilled. She whispered to Qyburn of Wildfire caches buried deeper than those rebels guessed. Yet outside her gates, common folk lit candles for northern victors, telling tales of winter shattering under ice spears and dragonfire alike. Hope traveled faster than fear now. The road ahead promised more blood, more trials, but on this night Winterfell glimmered like a hearth at the world's center. Flames banked, smoke curling, hearts beating not in dread but expectancy. Jon Snow closed his eyes, listening to the pulse of walls breathing life. Somewhere Ned Stark's words echoed. "When the snows fall and the white winds blow, the lone wolf dies but the pack survives." The pack had survived. And beneath that realization, deeper still, a quiet vow formed. No longer a shield against inevitable dark, but a key to doors no king had yet imagined. The dawn would come soon, uncertain, imperfect, but theirs to shape. He opened his eyes. Beyond ramparts, beyond pines, sunrise cracked the horizon. A blade of gold cutting night. He turned to Daenerys, and together they watched first light spill across a realm no longer divided by bones of winter, but bound by memory of its breaking. The world exhaled with them, and for the first time in long memory, the future tasted of soil, not snow. The morning after the Great Council dawned clear, the sky a cold pane of glass over a world still dripping with thaw. A light mist clung to the fields, twining through tents and newly mended palisades like a half-remembered dream. Jon Snow rose before first bell to the sound of ravens arguing at the rookery. He dressed without summons, black wool surcoat, greaves still nicked by undead steel, and crossed the yard with Ghost padding at heel. No horns, no cries of alarm, only the rhythmic clang of Gendry's forge and occasional clatter of hooves where scouts exercised remounts for the day's patrols. The peace felt fragile, a crust over cooling lava, and he tested each breath as though expecting the iciness of fear to return. At the newly barred east gate a mixed watch saluted. 2 unsullied spearmen in immaculate formation and a burly Karstark guardsman with cheeks rosy from Firedrake spirits. Jon returned their nods, then stepped onto the outer ramp. Below, teams of free folk bent backs to clear stones from a budding barley field. Frost-blighted, yet determined to sprout now that the soil warmed. He recognized Styr's daughter among them, black hair braided with bits of dragonglass like glossy beads. When she noticed his gaze, she lifted a chunk of granite overhead with theatrical strain, earning laughs from companions. John smiled despite himself and carried that warmth into the still-sleeping lane that curved toward the godswood. He found Bran beneath the heart tree, eyes half closed, fingers moving in air as if plucking unseen strings. The carved face oozed watery sap that glinted crimson. John waited until Bran's attention drifted back to present. "There's song in the soil," Bran murmured. "Roots hum with it when snow retreats." John glanced down. Tender green spears already pierced the leaf litter at his boots. "Will spring hold?" "For a while," Bran said. "Long enough to grow wheat if we guard the shoots." "Guard them from what? Cersei? More whites hiding beneath ice." Bran's pupils dilated, weightless yet heavy with perspective. "Mostly from ourselves, John. Peace is a field. It starves when left unworked." John knelt, ran a gloved thumb along one sprout. "How do we work it if we march south?" "By taking a harvest with you," Bran answered. "Take women skilled with seed, men who know soil, masons who mend walls. Let armies plant as they go. Conquest that feeds becomes stewardship, not occupation." John pictured Unsullied sowing barley outside Maidenpool, Dothraki digging irrigation ditches in the Reach. Absurd, yet the image carried strange promise. He stood, flicked dirt from gloves. "Tell the council at supper. They'll think you mad, but they'll heed your words." Bran smiled, distant again. "I am mad, but not wrong." By noon, pavilions along the King's Road stirred like a warren of bright-plumed birds. Squires unfolded banners still damp with morning dew while heralds rehearsed salutations none but protocol masters cared to perfect. In the riding yard, Lord Edric Storm sparred mounted against a Vale knight, lances tipped with leather blunted only partly. Splinters flew each pass. Lyanna Mormont whistled taunting scores. Near the new smithy, Gendry argued over rivet angles with a Tyroshi armorer who had followed Dornish envoys north in search of commission. Children darted everywhere, twine and scraps of linen transforming into improvised kites shaped like dragons, wolves, and, at least one cheeky lad's creation, an enormous onion meant to honor Davos. John moved through this bustle toward the stable yard where Daenerys inspected Rhaegal's bandaged wing. The dragon's injured pinion had knitted enough to allow short glides, but full flight remained weeks distant. She pressed a palm along the bone, whispering soft Valyrian comforts. John waited until she exhaled, then cleared his throat. "He heals," she said without turning. "Because healers coaxed arrowroot from frozen beds and brewed poultices all night. People who once feared his fire now tend his wounds." John studied the curved talons resting near her boot, each massive as a butcher's cleaver. They saw him defend them. Fear changed to gratitude. "When fear shifts so easily," she said, finally meeting his gaze, "I wonder how swiftly gratitude might shift to envy, then back to fear." "Leadership is winter," John replied. "No seed thrives without cold first." He extended a leather case. "Scout reports. Cersei's Sellsword fleet anchored off Duskendale. No move inland yet." She opened the case, scanning. "Time grows short, and roads remain mud," he answered. "We'll need cunning paths." Tyrion approached, limping, scrolls underarm. "Cunning is bred of Lannisters," he said, "though ours was often crumbed with poison. Fortunately, I've drafted something sweeter." He handed them parchment depicting a stylized map of the Crownlands. Colored lines traced supply avenues, blue for grain barges via Blackwater Rush, red for unsullied columns hugging coast, green for Vale Airy cavalry descending the Gold Road, yellow for Dothraki outriders sweeping stormlands. Daenerys frowned. "You chart the Dothraki through lands once loyal to Baratheons." Tyrion tapped the sheet. "Lord Edric rides ahead. His blood opens doors our blood might close. Dothraki will graze burned fallows, not villages. They'll plant barley behind them," Bran's suggestion, though I confess the Merrick Khalasar thinks sowing fields is a jest. "They'll learn." John traced the red line curving along coast. "Grey Worm leads Unsullied by galley, landing north of Dragonstone?" "Yes," Tyrion said. "We convert imperial docks into temples of grain. The city sees ships offloading food, not war. Cersei loses narrative that dragons bring famine. And if she torches those ships? Daenerys asked. Then we sail more. Your realm's new coin is abundance, my queen. Spend it lavishly. Make Cersei appear the wraith hoarding gold while children starve. Jon exhaled. I know war, not theater. You'll learn theater faster than war learns mercy, Tyrion said. 2 days later, the first march south began. It did not resemble a king's host or a queen's host. It looked like a traveling market. Ox-drawn carts carried barrels of pickled beets, sacks of oats, bundles of steel ingots, stacks of spruce planks. Between them rode columns of spearmen, archers, pike. Yet intermingled, not segregated. Free folk walked with Karstarks. Unsullied marched beside Riverlanders, step out of step but heart in rhythm. At the vanguard rode Jon and Daenerys, neither crowned, flanked by Arya on the left. Her hair pinned back with silver direwolf, and Grey Worm on the right, unsmiling sentinel. Tyrion and Sansa remained to govern Winterfell, forming a regency that blended wolf caution with lion cunning. Ghost trotted ahead like a silent banner, drawing gasps from small folk who lined the road to watch. Some placed loaves or dried flowers on ditch banks. Others simply stared, disbelief warring with hope. Jon dismounted often to speak with them. He accepted a grandmother's nettled tea, a child's carved whistle, a blacksmith's promise to craft nails once slag cooled. Each token weighed heavier than golden dragons, for they were minted in trust rather than treasury. South of the last river, they met the first sign of Lannister power. A toll gate manned by gold-cloaked guards under orders to confiscate contraband provisions destined for rebel forces. The guards had not expected dragons. Drogon soared overhead once, not breathing flame but letting his shadow swallow the checkpoint. Spears clattered to ground. Unsullied relieved the gate of its levy chests, redistributing coin to travelers who'd been forced to pay. Daenerys posted a notice. Roads belong to the realm, not to crowns. Jon worried such boldness might spark reprisals, but the caravan cheered, and news outran them faster than ravens. At Maidenpool, they found portcullis lowered. Ser Giles Rosby, styled Warden of Maidenpool by Cersei, stood atop battlement proclaiming loyalty to Iron Throne. Rather than assault walls, Jon called council at base of gates with town's guild leaders. He showed them wagons of grain. He showed them children of every house sharing bread. He reminded them Maidenpool had starved when war last closed its roads. The guildsmen vanished inside. At dawn, Rosby was gone, and gates opened. Jon never learned who persuaded whom, only that the newly installed Burgess Council bowed not to him but to the caravan itself, a living promise. Each victory bred new challenge. River crossings swollen by meltwater forced engineers to lash rafts from cedar. Dothraki bristled at being told to plant seed, arguing that earth beneath their stallions was sacred when unbroken. It took Bran's written counsel, delivered by Raven, describing distant grass seas where nomads sowed sorghum behind herds to feed the next generation. The calls relented, curious to try anything that might enlarge pastures. One night, camp pitched along the Blackwater Rush. Jon sat outside a lentil stew pot stirring embers. Arya approached, settling cross-legged opposite. You watch the dark as though expecting ghosts, she said. I do. Not whites, she clarified, voice softer than typical. Ghosts of choices. He nodded slow. I refused a crown of fire once. Now I wonder if realm shapes me toward another. She toyed with a twig, flipping it between fingers. If a crown takes shape, decide whether it's helm or shackle before putting it on. He studied her profile, cheeks smudged, eyes sharp as ever. And you? When the world settles, where will Arya Stark stand? Where roads have no names, she answered, smiling small. I will sail west of maps. If dragons can pull grain from sky, I can pull stories from horizon. Jon felt a pang, the prospect of losing yet another sibling to distance, but found no selfish argument. Write me from the edge, he said. I'll send ravens too stubborn to drown. Across camp, Daenerys conferred with Grey Worm and Lord Edric under a spear of torchlight. Maps fluttered. John watched her silhouette, posture iron straight even after leagues, gestures decisive yet tempered. He wondered if history could carve new lines rather than repeating old charred etchings. King's Landing loomed at last, a smudge of chimneys beneath westerly haze. The caravan halted beyond range of scorpion bolts, establishing a crescent of tents along northern shore of Blackwater. Vale engineers erected prefabricated granaries within days, stacking grain until perfume of wheat drifted on sea breeze. Inside the city, Cersei bristled. Qyburn's spies reported commoners cheering each new cartload. Her cell's-word captains complained of rising desertions, men slipping out gates at night to fetch free bread. She ordered executions of deserters returned, but each head spiked bred 3 more fleeings. Her hand clenched goblet enough to crack crystal. North of the Mud Gate, Jon convened parley on neutral meadow. Cersei's envoy, Ser Boros Blunt, jowls flushed, arrived under white flag. He demanded immediate withdrawal, citing trespass on royal grain reserves. Daenerys answered by inviting every city orphan to eat at open tables. The envoy nearly choked behind silken kerchief. Tyrion joined the caravan then, having sailed down coaster aboard a fast galley named Storm's Mercy. He limped into Jon's command tent, dusted salt from doublet. "My sister's fury burns bright," he said, "but her treasury grows dimmer than her sense. The Golden Company demands arrears. Ironborn captains threaten to turn prow if unpaid." He produced sealed letters, another of his network. "Debt is blade sharper than Valyrian steel, and Cersei bleeds coin. Plans coalesced, open markets outside gates, safe conduct for any citizen bearing child or grain sack, traveling bards singing of frost shattered by unity, maesters distributing pox salves free." The city's outer districts began slipping into nightly exodus, families seeking the Queen's Hearth camp where bread and hope baked side by side. One evening, Jon walked alleys of Flea Bottom disguised in hooded cloak. He saw gaunt faces brightening at mention of northern barley porridge, Dothraki horse milk cheese. He witnessed Lannister footmen exchanging breastplates for loaves. He returned to camp convinced siege might crumble without arrow fired. Cersei would not yield so delicately. On the 4th night, wildfire detonated beneath grain store outside Mudgate, sending green pyre roaring. Smoke curled into black mushroom. Screams cut quiet. Daenerys soared on Drogon, dousing blaze with torrents of loamy dirt scooped from riverbank. Unsullied chains hammered firebreak trenches. Yet 200 souls died, among them children. Jon cradled a boy charred in his arms, chest buckled by last breath. The smell seared memory deeper than any battlefield. He met Daenerys' gaze across smoldering ruin. Hers mirrored same furnace sadness, but deeper flickered something hotter, vengeance. That dawn, council convened in command tent heavy with ash reek. Edric pounded table. "Enough shadow war. We storm the gate." Dothraki calls snarled agreement. Grey Worm vowed unsullied discipline beneath walls. Only Bran's raven perched silent. Jon listened, anger boiling, yet memory of undead armies tempered fury. "If we storm," he said, "we burn what we came to save. We prove her right." He turned to Bran. "Is there path left untried?" Bran's eyes glimmered. "Cersei holds city by fear of famine. Show her fear of isolation." Tyrion nodded slowly. "A ring of grain feeding every village south and east. Famine becomes feast outside walls. Gold buys nothing when bread is free, and sells words who see no pay and no plunder drift like dandelion seeds on wind." Daenerys spoke at length then, voice edged but steady. "I will not become what I crossed sea to end. We tighten the noose, but with loaves, not swords. If wildfire strikes again, we douse, rebuild, outnumber her cruelty. When her people refuse to defend stone, gates will open themselves." To that, council assented, some grudging. Work resumed. Within fortnight, bakeries under canvas chimneys offered round loaves stamped with direwolf and dragon entwined. Healers roamed slums distributing salves. Blacksmiths traded nails for broken plowshares, forging spades, hoes. The camp became a city of its own, Gendry joked it might outgrow King's Landing before siege ended. Inside Red Keep, crack spread. Ironborn loot ships slipped anchor at dusk, sailing for Ika. Some Lannister bannermen rode north to offer fealty to Sansa, claiming distance from Cersei's madness. Qyburn urged Queen to unleash caches beneath Baelor's September, but Jaime, returned in secret after hearing of Northern Pact, confronted her. Their quarrel echoed, swords crossed, history repeated but twisted. This time Cersei's blade struck first. Jaime fell, handless stump now fatal. Cersei stared at crimson blossoming across her twin's chest, horror reflected in gold. In that moment, foundations shifted inside her, but the crack widened too late. She sent Qyburn with white flag to Jon's camp. Inside command tent, she confronted Jon and Daenerys across tables strewn with grain ledgers. "You've turned my city against me," she hissed, veil of composure shredded. "You feed them poison hope. We feed them bread," Daenerys answered. "Bread that fattens them for dragon feasts." Cersei's hand trembled. "Call off your tents. Withdraw north. I grant independence. Marry your wolves to your snowfields. Leave the south to me." Jon's jaw clenched. "Independence bought by silence as you burn rivals behind your gates?" Cersei swept arm, scattering parchments. "You know nothing of rule, either of you. Rule is clawing breath from throat each dawn, fearing dagger behind curtain." Daenerys' voice dropped to whisper, "Then let someone else breathe." Negotiations spun hours. Cersei bargained, threatened wildfire, wept for her unborn child. A lie Tyrion saw through, for Qyburn had earlier confessed stillborn months prior. She finally demanded safe exile to Casterly Rock. Jon glanced to Daenerys. She nodded. At dawn, trumpets sounded. City gates creaked. Unarmed gold cloaks emerged bearing chests of royal regalia. Highborn hostages followed. Lannister children, Tyrell cousins, hostages Cersei had once collected. Jon met them midway, accepted surrender of swords. Cersei herself rode last, clad not in silk but chainmail beneath sable cloak. She dismounted, relinquished crown to gray worm. Her eyes, once molten amber, looked hollow. "I kept it warm," she said to Daenerys. "I melted mine," Daenerys replied. "But we'll forge a new symbol together. A helm for builders, not tyrants." Cersei laughed once, brittle. Guards escorted her toward northern encampment to await tribunal at Winterfell. She did not resist, though her shoulders quaked with something beyond sorrow or rage. A solitude no throne could comfort. The Red Keep opened without siege. Streets echoed with cautious cheers. Bread wagons entered. Sel's words departed. Wildfire vaults were scoured and sealed by maesters. Inside throne room, dust motes danced in shafts of spring sun. The Iron Throne loomed, blade, rust, legend. Jon stood before it, Daenerys at his side, Grey Worm behind. Silence weighted the chamber. "Sit," she urged softly. He shook head. "It answers to no heart." He turned to her. "If you sit, sit for realm, not for seat." Her gaze lingered on jagged silhouette. She reached, almost touched, then lowered hand. "The throne will remain, but the realm must rise above it." Together they ordered smiths to blunt its edges, widen seat into plain high-backed chair, a symbol to keep memory but shed terror. Some protested desecration of centuries. More applauded. Weeks later, at a grand assembly in the Dragon Pit, a roofless arena once echoing with roars, representatives of every region signed the Pact of the Dragon Pit, an echo of Winterfell's arch but for the south. It decreed roads toll-free, grain tithe replaced by produce exchange, hostages abolished, wildfire illegal except under Maester Charter for mining. A rotating council, 30 chairs, chosen each harvest, would draft laws with consensus. Jon declined seat. Daenerys accepted first term only, pledging to step down and return north to oversee restoration after one cycle. When parchment dried, Drogon soared overhead, trailing banners stitched by Wintertown children. Direwolf beside dragon, bound by clasped hands. Cheers thundered. At feast that night, Tyrion found Jon leaning on balcony above river. "Every song ends," Tyrion said, refilling cup. "But some resonate beyond last chord. Today we added verse." Jon considered lights flickering across water, reflecting towers where once madness brewed. "Peace sings quietly. Let's hope realm listens." Tyrion sipped, smile rueful. "Quiet songs endure longer." Dawn after pact, Jon prepared to ride north. Sansa's raven reported saplings budding along wall foundations. Free folk built villages near Queen's Crown. Barley sprouted where last year only ice rained. He would help shape those fields. Daenerys met him in courtyard, offered a scroll of travel writs ensuring safe passage for all Starks. He clasped her wrist. "You built more than roads," he said. "You built new season." She answered with half-smile. "Spring builds itself. We just cleared clouds." They parted with promise of return. Arya rode with him as far as Maidenpool, where she boarded sleek galley bound for west, pockets full of blank maps. She hugged Jon, whispered, "I'll find what lies after sunset and carve Stark sigil on world's edge." He pressed kiss to her brow. She grinned, vanished up gangplank. Jon's homecoming to Winterfell weeks later felt like stepping into tale told by distant bard. Fields green, smithies clanging, children chasing kites shaped like onions and dragons and direwolves intertwined. He dismounted at Godswood. Bran waited beneath Heart Tree, ravens silent. "It grows," Bran observed, gesturing to saplings flowering around trunk. "So does realm," Jon answered. "You fear peace more than war," Bran said. "War I understand. Peace requires faith. Then plant." Bran outstretched withered hand. Jon knelt. Bran placed acorn in his palm. "Find spot beyond wall. Plant this. Let tree watch horizon's war forgot." Jon closed fingers. He felt weight of tiny seed, memory and promise bound. He rose, ghost at side, wind stirring cloak edges. North beckoned, but not with dread, with open earth awaiting seed. He left Winterfell at dawn, moon thin slice overhead. Behind, castle lights flickered out one by one as candles surrendered to morning. Ahead, Kingsroad rolled under fresh green canopy. He rode slowly, savoring hoofbeats, the scent of thawed loam. Somewhere to east he imagined Daenerys debating grain quotas, Tyrion drafting tax remission, Sansa schooling lords on justice balanced with memory. Westward, Arya hunted horizons. Above, ravens circled, scribes of sky. At Queen's Crown's meadow he paused. He dismounted, knelt beside Thorich soil, dug shallow hollow with gauntlet hand. Into it he set acorn covering gently. He whispered no words because words were wind, but pressed palm flat in silent vow to guard, to remember. When he stood, the breeze seemed warmer. Ghost barked once, tail sweeping. Jon mounted, spurred north. Snow still traced distant peaks, but sun rose clearer than he'd ever seen, gilding land with fragile, resilient gold. Behind him, in shadow of old watchtower, a tiny green shoot pushed through dirt moments later, uncurling toward light. No one saw, but earth felt, humming quiet chord that stitched seasons together. And somewhere far beyond known maps, a small ship bearing a wolf-browed girl cut westward across sunset, sails full, prow slicing new tide, writing next verses of story no throne could cage. The lone wolf had found his pack, and the pack had become forest, and forest had become promise that winter, however long, was never the only song the world would sing. The milk-pale moon hung fat and low over the ghost hills when Jon Snow reached the foothills south of Castle Black. He had traveled northward for 3 weeks, cutting a slow, deliberate path through the villages that once huddled in the wall's shadow. At every hamlet he paused to listen, to lend a hand, to remind himself what he was riding toward. Not the frozen ramparts of his memories, but the living people who still called the frontier home. Ghost trotted ahead at a wary prowl, white coat already molting into its lighter summer shade, pink tongue lolling with the casual assurance of a beast who had outrun mortal danger. Rough-shorn new grass spread like patchy velvet across ground that had lain ironbound just a month ago. Candleroot shoots, Thin, yellow spears that tasted sharply of onion and pepper sprang between granite boulders, and their scent rode the breeze clean as rain after smoke. As John crested the last rise, the wall appeared, a jagged, fractured line where ice towers once jutted sheer. From a distance it looked less like a rampart than a glacier's corpse felled by its own slow weight. Gaps yawned wide in 3 places, edges scalloped by thaw. Yet even in ruin it dominated the horizon, catching the first gunmetal gleam of dawn so that each splintered buttress shone like dull silver. He drew rein and let the gelding breathe, heart clenched between awe and grief. If the wall was memory carved in ice, then the cracks marked how memory changes once it has saved you. Below, Castle Black stirred in dim lantern glow. Smoke trailed from the repaired smithy. New palisades, timber-framed and braced with stone, replaced sections the dead had toppled. Someone had repainted the dire wolf on the main gate, white on fresh black pitch. A watchman's horn called a short note, curiosity rather than alarm. John urged the gelding down the slope. The portcullis rattled open, revealing a figure in patched black cloak trimmed rough with gray rabbit fur. Sir Dennis Mallister, elected Lord Commander after Clyda's refused the honor, stood straight, age-stooped yet dignified. His beard, once meticulously cropped, had grown into wiry half-moon bristles. His eyes shone at the sight of John. "Lord Snow," he greeted, voice creaky but resolute. "Or do I say king? The ravens croak all manner of news these days." "John is enough," John replied, dismounting. He clasped the old knight's forearm. "You look well, Sir Dennis." "I look like a scarecrow kissed by frost," the commander said, chuckling. "But the castle stands. That counts for more than vanity." He paused, gaze taking in the small entourage behind John. 2 free folk scouts whose tattoos marked them Ice River clans, and a trio of Northman masons leading a mule laden with iron spikes. "Come, warm yourself," he said. "The stew's mostly oat, but we spice it with dried apples now. Luxury of the new age." In the common hall, firelight gleamed off walls newly whitewashed with lime to deter mold. Benches held knights, watch brothers, and free folk alike. A boy of 15 from White Harbor sipping hot broth next to a grim spearman whose once blue lips still bore scars of frostbite. Perhaps 50 men in all, far fewer than the glory days, yet a greater garrison than John had feared. Bowls appeared. Steam rose. Conversation dipped to reverent hush at John's arrival, then resumed with heartening vigor. While Ghost lounged before the hearth, John and Mallister spoke in low tones. The commander's pages scribbled quick notations, grain tallies, calf births, new recruits. "The gift lands are green again," Mallister reported. "Small folk who fled south during the wars trickle back to restore sod huts. We sent patrols to each hamlet, offered protection without tithe. Most accepted." He stroked beard tip thoughtfully. "Your plan to grant them stewardship rather than rent is unconventional." John drank weak cider. "If we bind them to coin, we recreate chains the wall once forged. Let them keep what they grow. In return, they keep watch as our eyes." Mallister smiled thinly. "Honor seldom fattens purses, but perhaps it fattens souls." He tapped parchment. "One worry, raiders. Ragged groups of former free folk, unpledged, roam north gift. No more than 20 at a time, but they raid lambs, seed, iron tools." John's brow furrowed. "Deserters from Tormund's people? Some. Others, stray spears who followed Mance Raider then fled when the king died. They fear both crowns now." John nodded. "I'll ride north tomorrow, speak with Tormund at Long Barrow. If these men cannot bend to peace, we'll coax them south of the shivering sea shipping lane, offer new start in Shield Islands perhaps." Mallister's eyebrows rose. "A long voyage for men who spurn roofs. Sometimes wind and salt remind stubborn hearts that even ice melts." That night John slept in his old cell. He awoke thrice, first to wind howling through broken embrasure, conjuring phantom horns, next to Ghost nudging his hand when thunder rolled without storm, and finally to the hush of pre-dawn when memories of Ygritte's laugh fluttered the curtain of dream. He rose, splashed face with water so cold it numbed regret. The next morning, he set out east along the ragged wall trail. Mal Lister lent 4 mounted rangers. Mist clung to the flats, but sun broke through by mid-morning, scattering silver shards across puddles. At Queen's Crown ruins, they found a gathering of free folk, families erecting peat huts where marsh grass shimmered. Children chased each other with sticks fashioned into swords. A woman heavy with child waved shy greeting. John dismounted, accepted a reed cup of birch sap, and promised iron nails for roofing once his caravan returned south. By dusk they reached Long Barrow, formerly the Weeper's Camp, now a settlement of sturdy log longhouses encircling 4 mammoth bone totems. Smoke from hearth fires drifted upward in slow corkscrews. Tormund Giantsbane stood at gate banging a drum made from aurochs hide. He grinned at sight of John. "Little Crow King," he roared, lifting John from saddle into bear hug. "You bring warm weather in your breeches?" "I bring warnings," John said, voice muffled against furs. "Over mead thick as porridge," he explained raider attacks. Tormund scowled. "Cowards steal in dark rather than raise spear in council. We'll hunt them like hares." "I'd rather win them," John countered. "Offer farmland south of the new trench. Lord Glover needs hands." "Some men would rather chew ice than bread," Tormund shrugged. "But we'll try your sweet talking first." They agreed to assemble a moot at Icicle Ridge. Horn runners set off immediately, barefoot over crusty snow, carrying message that a new season required new bonds. That night John climbed the half-collapsed watchtower above Long Barrow. Moonlight spilled over pine-fletched valley. The shattered wall glimmered beyond. He felt, for first time, the pull of 2 worlds. One south where fields awaited plow, politics, dragons. One north where silence and starlight carved truths older than crowns. He wondered where he belonged. Daenerys's letters arrived twice monthly by Raven. She wrote of rebuilding the Dragon Pit as a university for healers and stablemasters, of negotiating with Braavosi bankers to convert Lannister debt into grant for orphanages, of finding joy teaching Unsullied to read poetry. Her ink bore warmth that touched John's chest, yet he felt no urge to ride south again soon. The north still whispered his name in languages of wolf and wind. Spring deepened. On the day of the moot, snowmelt turned streams into braids of quicksilver. Free folk bands arrived bearing shields painted with newly chosen sigils, eagles clutching sheaves, stags entwined with pine. Rangers in black mingled with them. Laughter erupted when one brother traded a pot of wall honey for an ermine fur collar. John addressed the gathering atop a stone cairn at Ridge Crest. "You crossed a world to escape winter's hand," he said, voice carrying over hush. "Now winter releases grip. We choose how to fill the space it leaves, raid or reap." He outlined proposal: parcels of gift land, once farmed, now fallow, granted to any free folk clan who swore peace with neighbors, kept at least one able body on wall repair crews each season, and traded surplus with Castle Black stores. No tithes, no oaths of fealty, only common covenant. Defend the living. Arguments raged. A spearwife insisted her clan would not bow to southern stone. An old then claimed soil south of wall lacked iron their blood required. Tormund thundered, "Iron in belly matters more than iron in hand." Another chief asked who would count fairness. John answered with Malister's suggestion: a council of 6, 3 free folk, 3 nights watch, changing yearly to settle disputes. He volunteered ghosts to sniff out any who sought to cheat weights. Laughs broke tension. At dusk, by firelight, the moot cheered approval. John felt weight shift inside his chest. Another cracked ceiling, stitched with trust rather than fear. Over the next fortnight, he rode the corridor between watchtowers supervising stakeouts for new farms. He helped dig first furrows with a dragonglass-edged plowshare. Symbolic more than efficient, but the glint of obsidian in rich brown soil drew murmurs of awe. Children placed sea-goat shells in furrows for good fortune. A septon from White Harbor recited blessing that mingled 7 prayers with praises to the old gods. At Mole's Town, he oversaw conversion of abandoned brothel into infirmary. Gilly, now skilled midwife, managed herbs and linens. She greeted John with shy smile, placed infant daughter in his arms, told him Sam wrote daily from Old Town, proud father beyond words. John's eyes stung. He remembered Sam's first day at the wall, trembling but determined. How far they had come. One hush velvet night, as aurora veils rippled above, John knelt at the acorn site he had planted. A sapling already stood waist-high, leaves unfurling delicate green hands. Ghost circled it, sniffed, then settled at base as sentinel. John traced bark furrows, recognizing pattern reminiscent of direwolf's snout. He whispered thanks to Bran, to Ned's memory, to soil. Late Somerset fields gold. Wave after wave of barley rolled across gift like lion mane. Rangers and free folk rethatched watchtowers. Children carved runestones marking safe wells. Maesters compiled vocabularies bridging old tongue with common speech. Castle Black resumed nightly horn calls. 1 for rangers' return, 2 for lost sheep, thrice only occasionally, signaling bear sighting, never again the dead. In early harvest, a raven from King's Landing brought invitation sealed in wax shaped like twining wolf and dragon. Daenerys requested Jon's presence at first conclave of high houses to finalize new charter limiting crown power. Sansa added margin note, "Your counsel needed." Jon pondered for a day, walking ramparts. He had grown to love scent of pine sap at dawn, the feel of spade handle. Could he leave so soon? That evening Mal Lister and Tormund cornered him outside Brew Shed. Mal Lister said, "A wall stands by virtue of keystones, but keystones must rest upon arch broader than they." Tormund added, "Go south. Let southern lords see the chill in your eyes and know the north is no sheep." Thus persuaded, Jon prepared departure. He left command in hands of Mal Lister and a free folk elder named Era Frostrunner, first woman elected first ranger. He addressed assembled rangers and farmers, promising return by first snowfall. Ghost, ever watchful, refused to stay. Jon accepted that some bonds outranked duty. The ride south felt different now, fields burgeoning instead of rot. He stopped at each settlement to admire orchards, granaries. Small folk waved and offered cider, not fearful glances. At Carhold, Lord Serwyn reported banditry all but vanished. At White Harbor, Lady Manderly prepared fleet to export northern oats to Dorne. Jon boarded a sleek galley named New Dawn, captained by Davos's eldest son, and sailed down the coast. At Dragonstone he reunited with Rhaegal, now strong, wing mended. Drogon welcomed Ghost with cautious sniff. Jon embraced Daenerys on Wye, and swept battlement. She led him through halls now echoing with scholars, scribes, and smiths refining dragonglass plow points. They feasted on cod baked in lemon. She recounted council debates where Dornish envoys argued for abolishing debtor prisons, and Gendry, now Lord of Storm's End, championed labor guilds. Jon listened, heart swelling at tapestry of change. Together they flew northward to capital, Rhaegal's shadow curving over King's Road like crest of hope. King's Landing greeted them with avenues planted in young plane trees, their trunks wrapped to protect from summer scorch. Citizens thronged to watch dragons perch atop Maiden's Tower, no longer monstrous but guardians of grain shipments. Jon recognized faces once gaunt now rounded, children playing without fear of crossbow quarrels. In the refurbished throne hall, edges of seat blunted into smooth iron lines, delegates gathered at round table carved from ship's mast of Victory, oldest vessel in royal fleet. Sansa presided alongside Lady Jordain of Tor, Edric Storm, Grand Maester Orwyle. Tyrion, cool-poised, served as secretary. The charter debate lasted weeks, delving into minutiae, tax ratios for grain cooperatives, representation quotas for free cities to the east, the question of whether Dothraki mosques were protected under faith charters. Jon spoke rarely, but when he did his words cut through circuitous rhetoric, reminding lords of knights when breath froze in lungs and only unity preserved it. In the final session, the assembly ratified the Covenant of the Realms. Monarch reduced to first among equals, war declaration requiring majority of provincial councils, Night's Watch funded by rotating grain tithe, dragons registered as assets of realm, their riders sworn to impartial protection. Sansa affixed signature as Lady of Winterfell, Jon beneath as Shield of the Gift. Daenerys signed last, simple Daenerys of House Targaryen, steward of flame. When the seal cooled, bells pealed across city. Not victory bells, but harvest chimes reclaimed from sept ruins. Pigeons took flight, children danced. That night Jon walked the banks of the Blackwater with Daenerys. Stars shimmered on river. He confessed uncertainty of his place. Between wall and council, wolf and dragon, memory and future. She listened, hand warm in his. Be both, she whispered. Be wild root and reaching branch. When your feet ache, ride dragon. When wings tire, walk forest. He smiled. Will the realm abide such wandering? The realm will be what we teach it to be, she replied. Restless, curious, forgiving. He paused, watching regal glide under moon. Then teach me, Daenerys. Learn with me, she countered. Their lips met, soft amid river breeze. On the morrow Jon would ride north again. Sansa demanded his presence for winter harvest fair, and Bran's ravens claimed the sapling now reached shoulder height. Daenerys planned to accompany him as far as Hornwood, then continue to Gulltown to inaugurate lighthouse run by orphans taught by maesters. They would part and reunite and part again, their paths braiding like streams feeding same sea. In years to follow, songs would circulate, of the wall planter king who carried acorns in saddlebag, of the dragon queen who brewed barley into peace, of a white wolf whose howl marked start of council sessions. But such songs mattered less than the quiet truth Jon felt planting that first seed, that winter's memory could guide without chaining, that spring was strongest when guarded by those who knew cold firsthand. On a crisp autumn dawn, as he and Daenerys prepared to leave King's Landing, Tyrion approached with bottle of northern honeymead. He raised it in toast. To endings that are beginnings, he said, eyes twinkling. To stories that refuse tidy knots. Jon clinked his cup, Daenerys hers. They drank, sweet warmth sliding down. And when their caravan set forth, dragons overhead, wolf song ahead, grain carts between, Jon looked back once, saw sun spilling over rebuilt walls, and realized the greatest walls are those that mark where fear ends and hope begins, and that these walls were rising everywhere now. In fields sown by former enemies, in laws that blunted crowns' blades, in children who built kites labeled with names once spoken only with dread. He faced the road, nudged his horse. Ghost bounded beside. Wind carried faint laughter from rear wagons where free folk argued whether apples grown south still tasted of summer snow. Jon breathed deep, tasting apple, pine, dragonfire, and promise all at once. The trail stretched north, long, winding, alive with work yet to do. He urged the gelding into steady trot, heart aligned with hoofbeat rhythm, eyes bright with the knowledge that winter had ended not with thunder but with seeds planted in its thaw. Seeds he would keep planting wherever soil, however scarred, dared believe in green again. Wind streamed across the King's Road like a river of invisible silk, rippling through hedges of wild dog rose and newly yellow broom. The caravan moved beneath that current in slow, steady rhythm, wagons creaking, harness leather groaning, iron-shod wheels leaving dark grooves in the hard-packed track. Jon Snow rode at the column's head, his black cloak traded for a sleeveless jerkin of undyed wool, direwolf pin gleaming at his collar. Ghost loped ahead as ever, white coat luminous against green. Only 3 lances accompanied him, proof of a realm that no longer required a king's procession of steel to keep the peace. He had left King's Landing 10 days earlier with Daenerys beside him, but at Maidenpool their roads diverged, she to Gulltown by sea, he to Winterfell by hoof. A brief parting kiss still warmed his thoughts. Now the north spread before him like an old song, its verses half forgotten yet stirring in marrow whenever pine resin thickened the air. Shafts of late summer light angled through ragged clouds, striping the road. Jon counted 5 wagons in his train, 2 hauled by Manderley oxen, loaded high with copper plows and sacks of barley seed. 1 piled with lumber felled from Stormland's groves, a gift from Gendry Baratheon. A 4th driven by a pair of free folk who guarded baskets of pine nuts to sew along new windbreaks. And the last wagon, smallest, ferried sealed scroll chests embossed with twin sigils, direwolf and dragon entwined. Within lay signed copies of the Covenant of the Realms destined for every holdfast library from Deepwood Motte to Bear Island. Word Jon had come to believe outlived iron. Near dusk they topped a low rise. Ahead the land fell away toward the Green Fork, its surface ragged with pale stubble where wheat had been cut. Sleek ravens wheeled over freshly turned earth. Their caws mingled with the clink of scythes being whetted by farmers still working long after sun's edge touched trees. John smelled straw, loam, wood smoke, and the faint salt of sweat. It struck him how different these scents were from the copper tang of blood that had perfumed his journey's scant years earlier. The rutted path forked before a stone cairn crowned by a crude carving of a heart tree face. A willow switch fluttered from one eye, a sign left by ranger runners, a tiding of peace along this route. John raised gloved hand. The column halted. He dismounted and approached the cairn. At its base lay offerings: a jar of honey sealed with beeswax, a tuft of direwolf fur, and 3 river reeds braided around a dragonglass shard. Symbols of union, of watchfulness, of night remembered yet fading. He turned to the caravan. "Camp here," he called. "We crossed the Green Fork at dawn." The drovers unharnessed oxen, and free folk scouts fanned into brush to gather deadfall. As cookfires sprouted, John climbed the cairn's gentle flank, sat beneath the heart face, and watched day bleed gold into indigo. An hour passed. The bowl of the sky deepened. Stars flickered on. First, bright spear points like runes the old gods etched to mark the world's new page. Footsteps rasped across gravel. A young Manderley squire named Lisa approached, cheeks flushed from hauling feed. She offered a tin mug of broth thick with barley and carrot. "Sir, sorry, lord," she stammered, uncertain how to address a man who insisted he was neither king nor lord in truth. He took the mug, thanked her. She lingered, eyes wide. "What troubles you?" he asked. Lisa traced toe across dust. "My gran says frost can still come in early autumn. She worries the south field barley'll spoil." John sipped. The broth's heat salted his tongue, grounding thought to earth. "Frost will nip leaves, but seed inside husk stays warm if stalk stands tall. Tell her to leave extra straw cover. The earth remembers heat longer than we think." Relief softened the girl's shoulders. She bobbed curtsy and retreated. John watched her descend, her silhouette swallowed by flicking lamplight. Amazing how quickly fear trade changed. From whites and axes to weather and mildew. Night advanced. Ghost padded up, dropped limp hair at John's feet, and settled with grunt. John chuckled, scratching behind one ear. "Share tomorrow," he said. Ghost's tail thumped once. As stars wheeled overhead, John closed eyes, letting breaths deepen to rhythm of field insects. In that half-sleep he heard Bran's raven whispers, the memory of promise sown, and Daenerys's parting vow. "Learn with me." Wind shifted. New scents brushed his mind. Pine resin miles north, distant campfires across Gift. He dreamed. Winterfell's sapling oak grew tall, branches coiling skyward until they pierced clouds, leaves like silver knives. Children played beneath, their laughter forging invisible armor around trunk. A dragon circled overhead, its shadow merging with branches into shape of protective wings. The heart tree face carved at castle root opened eyes, bark lips murmuring a single name. His mother's? He reached but woke, chill dew on cloak. Dawn glimmered rose. Caravan readied swiftly. They crossed the Green Fork on a new wooden bridge, a marvel of free folk ropework and veil carpentry spanning torrent swollen by melt. On its center plinth a plaque read, "Here we chose to build, not burn." John paused, hand brushing carved letters. 2 days later, they climbed hills south of Moat Cailin. Beyond, the neck stretched, a vast sea of reeds glowing with late-season gold. The great causeway that once funneled armies lay widened now, reinforced by stone revetments quarried from abandoned iron-borne forts. Reed wagons lined both sides, trading smoked eel and flax thread with Northman drovers. John guided train through hum of barter, nodding to crannogmen wearing jade frogbone ornaments. They saluted, no longer wary. At Moat Cailin ruins he found Sansa waiting astride a dapple gray mare, flanked by 10 armored guards in new livery, direwolf rampant entwined with sheaf of wheat. She wore riding leathers dyed deep crimson, an echo of Tully heritage, over quilted gown of moss green. Her hair glinted copper where sunlight spilled through arrow-slit arch. She dismounted, boots crunching shale. "You're late," she said, smile belying stern tone. "I planted 3 barley fields on the way," he answered, clasping her arms. "Overachiever." She kissed his cheek. She examined wagons, nodding approval. "Wheat lords of the Mander will be jealous. Wintertown's granaries nearly brim. These shipments may overflow barns. Then share with Shadow Tower. The wall's south face slopes grow rye." She led him to parapet where scaffold bridged 2 partially rebuilt towers. Below, masons shaped basalt blocks, banners of Bear Island, Serwyn, and then snapped above tool sheds. "The next fortifications rise faster than I dreamed," she said. "Riverrun's engineers devised lime ash mortar that sets in rain." John gripped rampart. "Walls again," he mused. "May they never face frost host. They face storms and bandits all the same." She shot him look. "Every realm builds walls, but we've learned to keep gates wide." Over supper they traded news. Sansa described Winterfair's first silk market, of Arbor Vintners booking space months in advance, of a mummer's troupe staging play about a dragon queen and an icy king who planted acorns. "Heavy-handed but charming," she said. Jon recounted the Covenant's signing, Daenerys's lighthouse school, Tyrion's scheme to standardize coin weights across 7 kingdoms. "Imagine," Sansa said, sipping nettle tea, "Tyrion Lannister, father of a stable currency. Stranger things." Jon smiled. That night, northern wind keened through murdered yet mending towers. Jon climbed scaffold alone. Starfields burned clear. No aurora, only deep velvet. He remembered standing atop wall before dawn with Sam, marveling at emptiness of north sky. Now emptiness felt pregnant with possibility, not dread. Journey resumed. Sansa returned by carriage. Delegations awaited her judgment at Winterfell. Jon rode north through Wolfswood's shade, where deer darted across leaf clutter, where young maples sported ribbon ties marking wedding pledges of small folk now free to court without war's shadow. Villages displayed hybrid customs. Free folk pole fences around northern longhouses. Night's watch signal fires adopted as harvest beacons. Change grew roots. Outside Wintertown, bell towers chimed midday. Smoke rose from dozens of new chimneys. Jon's caravan drew cheers. Children ran alongside wagons, chanting a rhyme. Dragons bake the barley loaf. Direwolves guard the door. Night's black watchful crows cry out, "No dead can march no more." Jon chuckled. He tossed copper seeds and stars coins to them, new currency minted from melted swords turned plowtines. Winterfell gates opened. Inside, courtyard bustled with masons hoisting quarried blocks to finish tallest tower spire, crumbled by giants' assault years before. Atop scaffolding stood Arya, hair shorter now, eyes bright as pivoting steel. She flashed grin, vaulted down timber beams as if descending invisible staircase, landed beside him silent. "Thought you'd never return," she teased. "Was ready to rename Castle Ghost's Keep. He's louder than ravens." Ghost barked offended, nose nudging her hand. She scratched behind ear, then seized Jon's wrist, dragging him toward main stair. "Come, the sapling needs trimming. Leaves block walkway." In Godswood twilight he beheld tree from acorn. Now 10 feet tall, trunk slender but firm, leaves shaped like miniature direwolf heads, edges silver-tinged. Beneath canopy Bran waited, ravens perched along chair's back. He looked older than months allowed, eyes calm, but smile faintly amused. "Our brother returns," Bran said. Jon knelt to examine bark. A face had grown where earlier none. Eyes closed, mouth soft curve, not carved by knife, grown. He brushed fingertips across grain and felt subtle pulse, like distant heartbeat. "The tree chose its own visage," Arya said. "Bran woke one dawn to find these lines." Jon looked to Bran. The boy, no, the greenseer, nodded. "The wood remembers Acorn's wish and your blood vow." Jon pressed palm flat, felt warmth. He whispered, "Grow well." Autumn deepened. John split days between Castle Council and rides across Gift. He joined masons shaping stone culverts. He sparred with training cousins. He visited forbidding marsh headquarters where free folk and rangers drilled for joint patrols. He and Sansa debated fair grain tariffs, forging North Charter mirroring Southern Covenant. Arya departed again, this time carrying letter of marque from Sansa allowing exploration west. She promised to map islands lost to myth. Daenerys arrived as first frost-feathered treetops, a surprise descent of regal scattering crows. She brought scrolls of lighthouse blueprints and seeds of dwarf orange bred in Dorne to survive chill. Her visit stretched 3 weeks. She oversaw greenhouse construction along hot springs, taught stable grooms draconic cues, dined with small folk in Wintertown. Under moonlit snow she and Jon walked ramparts. She marveled at stars. He pointed northern lights. They spoke of fear's silent cost. She confessed nightmares of green explosion under Red Keep. He shared dream of wall cracking anew. They held each other until dread seeped back into earth. One night, Bran summoned them. In council chamber lit by tallow, he unfolded tapestry of vision. A fleet of black sails leaving stepstones under new corsair prince, raiding small villages along coast. Daenerys vowed to intercept with galleys manned by Dorne and Stormlands. Jon offered rangers as marines. Plans spun. Winter visited lightly, thin snow brief. Fields of winter barley waved pale under ice stars. Jon stood among stalks, remembering dead friends, parents, lovers. He scattered handful of seed, whispering each name. Ghosts sat vigil. The wind carried seed down furrows. In spring they would rise. Years turned quietly brutal in their mundane demands. Crop blights, disputes over border stones, rogue Sellsword upstarts, outbreaks of spotted lung. Jon traveled lines between holdfasts, arbitrating quarrels. He learned to value parchment as much as sword. A signed irrigation agreement saved more lives than quelling raid. He aged into leaner frame, hair threaded silver at temples. Daenerys's dragon schools produced first clutch of tamed hatchlings. Smaller cousins trained to light kills for desert glass smiths. Sansa's Northern Council passed law granting women equal inheritance rights if they served village muster, prompted by Bear Island advocacy. Tyrion's royal mint introduced seed-engraved coins to remind all wealth sprang from soil. One crisp spring dusk, Jon rode east of Last Hearth, scouting new farmhouse. He paused at Ridge. Far in distance, beyond shimmer of ghost grass, the wall still glittered, repaired section by section, but never again the impenetrable monolith. Gaps remained as gates where free folk wagons traveled at will, watched by black-cloaked stewards who logged comings, not barred them. Torches lit those passages, not to frighten but to guide. He realized suddenly he had not dreamt of wights in many moons. Their memory lingered like silhouette in snow, yet terror had loosened its grip. Life had woven stronger threads. He urged his horse downhill. Ahead, children's laughter drifted from Homestead Yard, where free folk boys chased northern girls in game of hoop and stick. A woman who once wore facebones and screamed war cries now bent over loom with Wintertown weaver, chatting of wool ply. Jon dismounted, waving. Dog barked greeting. Ghost answered with low chuff. He felt peace settle inside chest. Weighty, not fragile. Peace earned by blade and by plow. He thought of Daenerys reading library scrolls, of Bran rooting dreams into trees, of Arya charting storms beyond horizon, of Sansa balancing grain ledgers and hearts, of a realm that had learned to build walls without closing gates, to carry flame without burning fields. Night fell velvet. Stars burned as always, but now he sensed music in their quiet flicker. A song without end, verse without final chord. He lifted gaze, breathed northern air rich with distant pine and heathfire, and spoke softly the vow he'd once murmured to Acorn and Godswood. To guard the living. He had not ceased. He would not. Guarding had become sewing, teaching, listening, mending. Duty no longer chained. It rooted and grew, branching across land and sky, as endless as night's tapestry. Jon swung back into saddle, steering toward Winterfell lamps glowing warm in distance. Ghost bounded ahead, white tail a banner of quiet triumph. Fields rolled beneath their pace, furrows waiting for spring's fingers, earth humming memory of winter survived and seeds uncountable yet to sprout. And somewhere far across seas, on deck of sleek caravel named Dawn Chaser, Arya Stark sighted first unknown shore, a ribbon of silver sand beneath turquoise swell, and smiled wolf bright at dawn she alone would name. She raised black flags stitched with compass rose and dire wolf leaping west, and the wind caught sails taut with promise, carrying Stark song into unmapped morning. So the realm breathed, and beating within its chest were the hearts of those who had once braced against endless night, hearts now tuned to seasons, to stars, to the quiet, unending labor of keeping tomorrow alive. The song endured, verse upon verse, carried by wings and roots and the steady steps of a man who no longer needed crown or throne to know his worth. And the world, for a brief shining while, turned toward green. Winter's breath broke against the walls of Winterfell with only a gentle sigh that first morning of the new decade, more reminder than threat, as though the season itself had learned restraint. Dawn seeped through a thin frost haze and painted the courtyard silver. Jon Snow rose from a narrow pallet in the eastern guest tower, careful not to wake the two wolfhound pups sprawled at his boots. Ghost's latest charges, fostered by the kennelmaster after a lone she-wolf slipped south of the neck. He pulled on rough trousers, shrugged into a wool doublet sewn with patches of undyed hide, and stepped into a corridor quiet but for the hush of coals settling in wall sconces. On the rampart a salty wind carried hints of the shivering sea, 40 leagues distant. To the west, smudges of smoke suggested breakfast hearths in Wintertown. He watched light creep down granite towers and felt the pulse of the castle beneath his palms, as familiar as heartbeat now. Out on the practice yard, squires of mixed birth, Bear Island girls shoulder to shoulder with lanky boys from Duskendale, weighted hay dummies with freshly stuffed straw. Their instructor, Sir Jane Smiles, barked cadence that cracked the morning stillness. The cadence merged with the clamor of far-off hammers, where a half-circle annex rose against the curtain wall. A greenhouse heated by piping strung from the hot springs, Daenerys's gift to northern winters. Jon descended to yard level, giving the pups leave to wrestle with each other near the well. At the armory entrance he paused. 2 Karstark blacksmiths and 1 former then hammered iron into flanged beams under Gendry Baratheon's steady eye. Gendry greeted Jon with a raise of chin but kept the rhythm of his hammer. Sweat beaded his brow despite the chill. "Rivets or rails today?" Jon asked. "Rails," Gendry said without missing stroke. 4 brands lift. Easier to haul grain to tower loft than carry it 1 sack at a time. Figures carved a nice curve into plans last night. Jon nodded, impressed. "Let me know if you need more oak braces. Plenty felled near Wolf's Wood Edge." He left as Gendry grunted assent. He found Sansa in the solar off the great hall, parchments unfurled across cedar table. Her quill hand moved like a dancer. Sun through windows limned copper hair with flame. "Letters to Gulltown?" he guessed. "Copies of tariffs," she said, dabbing sand on fresh ink. "The Vale sends apples by barge now that the Mander broke ice. We pay in flax and saltfish." She tucked a stray curl behind ear, glanced up. "You're riding the ridge today?" Wanted to see how far the root cellars progressed. He accepted a mug of chicory brew from her page. After that, north to Queen's Crown. Era reports stonemasons unearthed a crypt chamber. He hesitated. Bran might wish to see. "He's been in the Godswood since nightfall," Sansa said. "Tell him yourself." She rolled scroll, sealed it, then stood. "Walk with me a moment." They paced along covered walkway that overlooked the bailey. Below, stable grooms brushed mud from shaggy garrons. Beyond, the new scriptorium windows glowed as novices transcribed the Book of Long Night. All of it looked ordinary now, but Sansa's voice carried wonder. "Remember the yard after the Battle of Winterfell? Burned timbers, blood in the kennels, the smell." She drew cloak tight. "I thought nothing beautiful could ever live here again." Jon recalled, stomach nodding. "Yet here we are." "Here," she agreed and turned to him fully. "Choose a date for the harvest moot. People crave cause for gathering." She squeezed his arm, and parted toward the kitchens where spice smoke already sweetened air. John crossed training yard to the godswood. Icicles chimed as wind brushed through the sapling bran once called a keystone. Now its trunk was as thick as John's thigh, bark flecked with white runes grown naturally. Bran sat beneath it in wheeled chair, eyes half-lidded, fingers resting on the moss. Ravens perched along branches, feathers catching pale sun. John cleared throat. Bran's eyes focused. Queen's crown crypt stones cracked, John reported. Want to see them? Not yet, Bran said, voice carrying timber of far places. Dreams there have not settled. Wait a month. He tilted head. You ride East Ridge? John nodded. Bran's gaze drifted north. Mind the river. Ice thins. John accepted the counsel. Bran rarely voiced warning without reason. Hours later, mounted on a roan mare, John led four rangers across rolling hills where snow lingered only in shadowed folds. They reached Ridge by noon. Below, amid spruce and birch, a half-circle of stone jutting from ground marked site of new communal storehouse. He dismounted. Free folk women wielding chisels paused to wave. John inspected foundation trenches, noting frost lines receding deeper each week. A builder named Wulfric described plan to run vent shafts to keep roots cool in summer. Leaving Ghost with masons, John and two rangers pressed north on foot to inspect thaw near river. Bran's warning proved prescient. Meltwater sluiced beneath surface, making treacherous crust. They circled wide. In doing so, John spied fresh tracks, small, booted, perhaps child. Odd this deep in timber. He followed sign to glade where a boy not yet 10 sat honing a sliver of dragonglass with flint. The child started at strangers, but John crouched, palms open. The boy spoke halting common. A crowguest from Frostfang clan, runaway seeking sky tree that sang in his dreams. John listened, realized he meant Bran's keystone oak, free folktales already mythologizing it. John smiled, offered to guide him home and arrange safe pilgrimage come midsummer moot. The boy agreed, cheeks flushing pride. Back at Ridge Camp, masons finished setting first lintel. They sang as they worked, a tune John did not know, verses about seeds crossing walls. The newly rescued boy joined chorus, voice clear. Evening settled with smell of pine pitch and venison stew. John sent runner to Long Barrow with news, then penned a quick note for Sansa. Frostfang youth found, safe. Keystone stories travel faster than ravens. Days blended. He rode coast to White Knife Mouth where fisherfolk erected lighthouse tower patterned after Dragonstone design. He sailed short hop with Davos, now Admiral Davos, from White Harbor to inspect breakwater repairs. He visited Deepwood Motte, where Lady Glover showed off flax mills turning sailcloth for Western Fleet. Everywhere he carried pocketful of acorns and planted one at each new schoolhouse, each watchpost, quietly repeating promise. On the first day of the 9th month, he stood once more on Winterfell's ramparts beside Daenerys, who had flown north after quelling Stepstone's corsairs with yield not blood, granting them farmland on cracked isles if they surrendered ships. They watched Aurora waltz across sky. She shivered despite cloak, and he drew her nearer. They spoke of dragons. Viserions' wild brood surfacing across shivering sea archipelagos. Rhaegal's clutch of 3 eggs warming in cliffs above Dragonstone. If any hatched, they vowed to raise them in pairs, 1 dragon for field, 1 for forge. In moonlit quiet she asked, "Do you regret refusing crown?" He answered honestly, "A king's seat would chain me to stone. Here I walk fields." He glanced to her. "You," she exhaled mist. "I once burned cities for a throne. Now I see thrones as scaffolds, useful during building, torn down when roof holds." She touched his cheek. "We build roofs, John. Let others polish seats." Behind them bells clanged. Midnight change of watch. From tower below, Malister's successor, Era Frostrunner, now Lord Commander, sent call across walls. 3 short notes, 1 long, meaning all quiet. John smiled, marveling that quiet could ring so sweet. He did not sleep but walked ramparts until pre-dawn, counting constellations Bran had named during star lessons. Spear of Dawn, Twin Seedlings, Dragon's Bride. When he finally laid head on fur pillow, dream wove image of sapling grown colossal, branches spanning from Dorne's salt coast to Stormland's cliffs. Under its shade all banners hung as washing on single line, colors bright, edges touching. He woke to ghosts' muzzle nudging. Outside window, sun spilled gold across tower bricks, and smell of clover drifted from beyond walls. In distance church bells chimed seeds and stars choir. John rose, stretched, and felt the ache of traveling miles and years. Yet inside, a lighter ache thrummed. Anticipation, like soil about to split for root. He had lived long enough to see winter broken, long enough to witness peace demand as much courage as war. And he understood at last that life's great vow was not carved in stone or crowned in iron, but planted in yielding earth again and again, trusting each fragile sprout to lift its head toward uncertain sun. With that thought he descended spiral stair, eager for next problem to mend, next seed to sow, next distant glade where Heartface might open unbidden. The pups yipped in corridor, paws skidding on flagstones. Ghost barked low, tail sweeping. John laughed, echoing across hall, sounding to his own ears less like a king or commander than simply a man alive in season of growth. He gathered cloak, acorns, ledger, and the day began. Another measure in the long, unsung song of tending what had survived the night. The sun's last light lingered over Winterfell like a smear of cherry across hammered steel, and torches already guttered along the walkways when Jon Snow returned to the quiet loft beneath the rookery. Quills, scattered over a low trestle table, shivered in the draught sneaking through arrow slits. He laid his gloves beside a half-written missive, ink dried to a dull sheen, and let his eyes adjust to gloom. Below him the courtyard thrummed with muted activity. Kettles banging in the kitchens, mellow laughter weaving between stable walls, a lone flute piping a tune strangers now called the Builder's Lullaby. John half smiled and eased himself onto the oak bench by the window, kneading stiff shoulders. From this height he could see the lights of Wintertown dancing against a velvet horizon, each lantern pulsing like a slow heartbeat. A knock rattled the lintel. Gendry's broad frame blocked the doorway, hammer slung behind one shoulder, dark curls streaked with sawdust. "Wanted to catch you, for you buried yourself in parchment," he said, stepping inside. Tormund's delegation arrived. Era asked if you'd witness the oath exchange tomorrow at dawn. John nodded. "Where's Tormund settling them?" "Along the New Ridge Road, by the Barley Terraces. 20 families. Asked me to build a communal long hall." Gendry's grin flashed. "Said he'll carve bears on the eaves so the sheep know who's boss. They'll fit in well enough." John rubbed tired eyes. "Tell Era I'll be there." As Gendry turned to leave, John added, "Oh, and have you news from Storm's End?" The smith paused. "Letter this morning. Edric says the citrus orchards survived the salt gale. He bragged about lemons the size of fists." Gendry's grin faded to thoughtful curve. "Strange world where a bast, where a blacksmith becomes correspondent to lords." John's chuckle followed Gendry down the stair. Alone again he dipped quill, drew fresh line. To Daenerys on the eve of the Ridge Oath. He hesitated, tapped feather against lip. Words formed slower these days. Statesmanship tired him more than swordplay ever had. But she prized detail, the names, the scents, the tiny victories that would never reach southern bards. He wrote, "Today the sapling reached my height. Bran says by next summer the ravens will weave nests beneath its third branch. Sansa insists we mark that day as festival, though I fear what pageantry she'll devise. The Frostfang boy you asked after, Natty, is thriving. He carved a wolf-head whistle that lures the pups into outright rebellion." He stopped when Ghost's ears pricked. Footsteps again. This time soft. Sansa slipped through, cloak swirling. "I need you," she whispered. "In council now." John followed her along torchlit corridors, through narrow door into the solar above the great hall. Fire roared. Maps sprawled across trestles. Bran sat beneath the heart-tree sigil, pupils dilated. Era Frostrunner and Maester Gerardes stood close, faces taut. Sansa gestured to parchment unrolled in Bran's lap. A raven from the Shield Islands. John scanned the script. Reports of ships, black sails with no heraldry, raiding fishing hamlets along Sunset Sea. Survivors claimed attackers wielded dragonglass blades but bore no banner of free folk. Worse, tales of pale-eyed men chanting in tongues unknown. Corsairs? John murmured, trying to dismiss memory of Night King's cruel blue. But how dragonglass? Girardi's cleared throat. That island chain harbors obsidian deposits. Still, forging requires skill we believed unique to our forges. Era stepped forward. Long Barrow scouts met a traitor out of Old Town. Word says a red priestess passed through months ago, preaching second dawn and gathering zealots. Perhaps she found crafters. Bran's voice drifted, distant. I saw obsidian glow in hands that did not fear its curse. He blinked slowly. I saw waves swallowing black hulls. John studied the maps. Shield Islands lay far southwest, near churning seas where summer storms birthed. He straightened. We must send aid. Sansa pressed fingertips to temples. King's Landing dispatches a fleet already. Daenerys rides regal to Storm's End. They request northern representation. John breathed steady. I'll lead rangers to Deep Den Port. We'll sail at first tide. Take whom you trust, Sansa said, but not at expense of Winterfell's harvest. Southfield's near ripening. We cannot leave them unguarded. Era tapped pommel of her spear. Ego. The Watch owes those isles protection. Pirates used our chaos once. Gendry will volunteer, John predicted. And Lyanna, Sansa added, though her eyes flickered with worry. Bran whispered. Seed must meet sea lest storm uproot all. Dawn broke amber. Winterfell's east gate opened to a column of 50. Era's black-cloaked brothers. A dozen Bear Island spears led by Lady Lyanna Mormont. 5 free folk archers. 2 maester's aides bearing casks of healing salves. Gendry riding at Jon's side with warhammer across back. Ghost padded ahead, tail erect. Sansa watched from parapet, cloak whipping. Jon raised fist. She nodded once, the steel in her eyes both blessing and command. Return. They rowed hard to White Harbor, where Davos's flagship, the North Breeze, awaited with holds stocked in equal parts barley and barbed bolts. Harbor cranes swung crates of pine pitch barrels aboard sleek dramens loaned by Lady Manderly. Gulls screamed above. Davos greeted Jon with weather-worn smile, clapped Gendry's shoulder. Storm brewing south, Davos warned, glaring at sullen horizon. But tides favor speed. Below decks smelled of tar, salt, and rye. Jon found quarters yet slept poorly. Visions of black glass daggers slicing through lantern gloom haunted rest. He woke to deck pitch and roar of surf striking hull. Days blurred into rhythm of creak, cry, gull, and lash of spray. Bare-sail winds propelled them past the Sisters, where lighthouse beams swept arcs. Regal's shadow dipped once, Daenerys circling before banking south to rejoin main fleet. Era practiced sword forms at prow, blade silver blur. Lyanna argued with Davos about knot integrity while tying a cleat herself. On fifth dawn storm clouds sealed sky. Waves like living hills crashed, slate dark. Davos bellowed commands, sails reefed. When lightning forked, Jon glimpsed distant silhouettes. 3 ships bearing black canvas, hulls pointed like arrowheads. They rode storm with unnatural ease, slicing towards Shield Islands. Trumpet blasts, battle sails unfurled amid wind shriek. The north breeze heaved to intercept. As distance closed, hostile ships revealed figureheads. Twisted 7-point stars merged with dragon fangs, painted bone white. Crew wore leather masks dyed obsidian hue, eye slits glowing with embers of torchlight. Arrows whistled. Free folk archers responded, obsidian-tipped shafts shattering against enemy bulwarks. Jon surged across deck, calling for grapples. Lightning illuminated his blade. Valyrian steel cord, dragonglass-edged. The clash of hulls boomed like mountain's heart. Boarding lines tautened. Jon leapt, landing amid masked warriors whose blades glimmered glassy black. They hissed foreign syllables. He met the first with downward cleave. Dragonglass cut through bone and visor. However, wound bled not red but watery gray. A chill licked his spine. Not whites, Lyanna barked, cutting another. But touched. Gendry's hammer caved a mask. Sparks dyed rain violet. Era parried twin blades, her spear spinning arcs of silver spray. Jon pressed toward ship's mast. There he saw Leader, a tall woman robed in crimson lacquered by rain, hair braided with shards of obsidian. Her eyes burned ember orange. At her side, a curved dagger pulsed faint heat. She spoke in Valyrian. Azante's hen glaze stand down. The second dawn claims the sea. Jon answered same tongue. The sea belongs to all free peoples. He advanced. Who are you? I am Thyra, voice of the unburnt flame. She lifted dagger. Runes ignited. We gather the shards of the long night, forge them anew. The world must remember fear or grow weak. Lightning cracked. Jon lunged. Steel met stone glass, sparks swirling. Thyra's dagger curved fast. He caught blow on flat, slid aside. Rain sizzled where blades touched. Around them battle raged. Unsullied marines from Daenerys' fleet had boarded, pressing zealots. Yet Thyra's disciples fought with manic rigor, chanting. Jon fainted high, drove pommel into her ribs. She staggered but laughed, voice echoing storm. You broke the frost, but hearts grow cold again. We kindle new dread. She slashed, scoring his leather. Heat seared skin below. Jon grimaced, stepped into her guard. Locked hilts. Over shoulder he glimpsed regal bank low. Flame lancing across another black-sailed ship, sending zealots overboard. Thyra hissed, tore free, began murmuring words old Valyrian yet twisted. The dagger's runes flared, green-gold flicker reminiscent of wildfire. Jon sensed explosion. He dived, tackled her to deck just as blade erupted in bright gout. Wood splintered, mast shuddered. They rolled. Jon rose first, kicked dagger overboard. Thyra clutched broken ribs, but smile lingered. Many shards remain, she said. Soon songs will beg for night's return. Gendry and Era subdued remaining zealots. Ship fires doused by rain steamed acrid. Survivors bound, vessels secured. Daenerys' flagship signaled. Other enemy ships fled before Regal's wrath, scattering west. Dawn unveiled wreckage. Charred hulls, drifting masks. Thyra lay in brig, refusing food. Jon stood outside bars. Why Dragonglass, he asked. She pressed blood-flecked lips to steel. True fire burns cold. Eyes gleamed fanatic. Break the world, shape it anew. You of all men know forging. Jon's jaw tightened. He ordered guards to keep vigilance, though he doubted she would break physical bonds. Her weapon was belief. Council convened on quarterdeck. Daenerys, Davos, Jon, Era, Lyanna, and Lord Tyrell's envoy Ser Merrill Flowers. Daenerys spoke first. We've glimpsed surface of cult. Storm's End captured supply records. Obsidian shipped from Shadowlands by way of Karth smugglers. They mean to fashion fear, replicate what once walked in frost. Davos spat. Fools stirring embers. Ser Merrill spread maps. Dotted markers along coast from Arbor to Old Town, raids increasing. We must extinguish movement before it catches common folk desperate for purpose. Era's eyes hardened. The Watch will hunt whispers. We've walked ice. We'll tread surf. Lyanna smirked. Bear Island ships slice seas sharper than any zealot dagger. Agreement murmured. Jon weighed choices. Strength alone won't quell ideology. We show people better fires, hearths, not pyres. He looked to Daenerys. Open lighthouse schools along western coast. Teach forging for plow, not blade. Spread seed and stars creed. Scarcity births zeal. Daenerys nodded. I will petition council for funds. Plan formed. Joint naval patrols, coastal outposts with grain silos, traveling bards recounting long night truths. Red priests aligned with Thurs's legacy to preach compassion, not flame. Storm eased. Convoy sailed for Old Town to deliver prisoners. There, Citadel archmesters analyzed zealot weapons. Dragonglass laced with wildfire dust, unstable but deadly. Raven dispatches flew north and south, calling vigilance. John spent week aiding refugees, overseeing burial of raid victims. He spoke at small folk gatherings, recounting Winterfell's rebirth. Thyra watched from cell window, eyes narrowing. On final night in Old Town, she requested parley. John entered guarded. She crouched at porthole bars. "Why you?" she whispered. "Why break the circle, yet deny new orbit?" John considered. Because fear yields brief unity, then division. Hope grows slow but roots deeper. She laughed, dry. "Roots burn. Not if watered by memory," he replied. He pressed palm to steel. "Remember night, but sow dawn." She turned away. Northern autumn neared harvest when John returned. Fields glowed amber. Children scuttled between shocks of barley, gathering fallen grain in small baskets. At Winterfell he faced Bran under Keystone Oak. Ravens circled lazy loops. "Storm quelled for now," John reported. Bran nodded. "Storms return, but seeds grow." Leaves rustled overhead, silver and green. John felt hush settle, like chapel bells. "We must prepare hearts," Bran said, eyes distant. "Fear's echo clings as frost memory. Only many songs drown it." John exhaled. "Then we'll keep singing." Harvest moot day dawned crisp. Villagers, free folk, and knights thronged Winterfell. Banners fluttered. Direwolf, dragon, bear, kraken now olive branch wreathed, even gilded rose. Stalls sold pumpkin hand pies, ironborn seaweed bread, Dornish citrus jam. Musicians from Bravos plucked lutes while a Karth juggler balanced glowing orbs of colored sand. In widened courtyard, John stood beside Daenerys, Sansa, Bran, Gendry, Aera, Lyanna, Davos, and Tyrion, bearing ledger and sly grin. Children from each region formed circle around sapling oak, now hung with ribbon prayers. John raised voice. "We gather to harvest, to share, to remember night's cold and dawn's warmth. As seed enters earth, so hope enters heart. Let neither be left untended." Daenerys stepped forward, placed seed coin at tree's root, symbol of covenant with land. Others followed. Aera set knight's watch clasp. Lyanna, carved bare tooth. Tyrion, quill. Bran, raven feather. Sansa, loaf of barley bread still warm. Crowd cheered. Bells pealed. Flutes soared. That evening fires crackled across fields. John sat on low stool beside hearth where free folk elders traded riddles with Septon novices. Ghost dozed by his boots, pups wrestling nearby. Daenerys slid beside him, shoulder touching. "Storm's horizon clear for now," she said. "Always another." He smiled faint. "But walls have gates, and we guard with hearts open." She laid head on his shoulder. Together, then, through every season. John gazed at sky. Stars bright above, sapling oak silhouetted, branches reaching in promise. The world hummed quiet, work never done, song never complete. Its melody the shuffle of feet sowing grain, the clang of forge shaping plowshare, the creak of ship bearing books not blades, the laughter of children unafraid to chase fireflies. Over all, like deep drumbeat, was the vow made beneath ice and honored in green. To guard the living, not with chill of fear but with warmth of shared dawn. He closed eyes briefly, letting music of harvest night soak bone, and felt the land breathe, and breathed with it. Steady, steadfast sowing.